Okay. Okay, good morning to everybody. This is our second video. It's Cardinal Mazarin Geopolitics channel. Today we will have our second meet, and this time we will have a different point about the actual situation in Ukraine and let's say worldwide. And the speech guest panel of today, it's more various than the other time. We are still waiting about the military summary channel because he had some let's say work family problem, but probably it will connect a little bit later. We have Yana of New World Econ, Eric and the Tanks, and Defense Politic Asia, but it's our affectionate from Singapore. He loves us so much that he connects every time during night. So we'll start today with a different format. We'll start with a short presentation, and then New World Econ, Defense Politic Asia, and it will close Eric and the Tanks. It will be completely different from the other side because we will not do this time direct analysis on field, but more analysis in general. And at the end, I will collect all the question and answer from Facebook, YouTube, and whatever, and we will do a question and answer section at the end. So if you want to make question, we can send it in mail, cardinalmazzarino@gmail.com, or Facebook or YouTube channel, and I will put it at the attention of the speaker that you will want. Second information, these speech are made for the purpose to make a different analysis about the actual situation, as I already said, in the war conflict in Ukraine, but also to create a group that will be part of a geopolitical school that we will organize in Italy, in Gardona Riviera on the Lake Garda, in an amazing location in October. So it's a little bit a coming soon presentation. Every month we will try to make this short presentation to have a time schedule, hoping that the war will end before. But however, we will do it till the geopolitical school. So for today, I will open with a short presentation, but it's about my point of view. But it's a little bit different. I liked a lot to have in this field two presentation or speech that are with different point of view. New World Econ from US, the Defense Politic Asia from Asia. I will try to put an European point of view, but my formation is a little bit different from what you will expect, and I will explain why. I am an industrial engineer as formation. I didn't make university in Italy because I had a technical formation. After secondary school, I made IT, let's say a pre-bachelor in IT, and I opened my company when I was 21. So after this, for let's say only for fun, I studied master courses in Italy, a lot about politics, and the two most important studies that I did was in 2012 at University of Oslo about international politics and Scandinavian politics, and another one that was important in 2016 in GIMO. For who don't know, it's like the University of Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, and I did it in Moscow, in Odintsovo. Why I'm telling you this? Because my formation, it's mainly administrative. So I am also a politician at local level from 2009. And I have a lot of friends in politics worldwide, any countries, any party, and I am very well connected also with Russia. So I can tell you a different point of view. So what I will start, this story didn't started February 24. It's a big mistake to think that the war is something that started this year, and it didn't start in 2014. So it's something that it's a different approach that we have to do it to analyze correctly what it's this situation. The three books that I will suggest to you, it's like the world was going our way. Why? Because it's a different approach of what could be the change of geopolitical maps after this war. Why? This is one collection about the Mitrokin report. I don't know if you have everybody heard about it. It was like a former KGB agent that was taking out a lot of documents about all the relationship of Russia in foreign politics. It's very interesting to understand what we are not understanding. For example, that the alliance Russia-China is not so clear. Historically, it's like hate love. It's not love alliance. We will support you any case. Second one, it's like an Ukrainian professor that it's analyzing all the end of Soviet Union, why it was the collapse, and the situation about the former Soviet Republic. I will talk about it a little bit. And the last one was the last years about the Soviet Union. It's very interesting because it was written by Strobe Talbot, that was the advisor for the US government about all the Soviet Union issues and foreign policy. So let's take a little look about Soviet Union, because everything that we are talking is still about the border of Soviet Union. The first problem is a lot of people don't know when and where started the collapse of Soviet Union, because the process was very long, and it started from the Baltic states, from Moldova, from Caucasus, and Ukraine was not the first. But it was the last. So the Baltic states were the states that were never recognized as part of Soviet Union by the USA. And the main thing is that if you will look at the history of the book that I suggested to you, you will see that George Bush father was not interested in the dissolution of Soviet Union, because for the interest of the USA was much better to have Soviet Union that all the former republics independent, because the Soviet Union was at the moment weak. It was asking for the help from the West. So it was a better condition to have a weak Soviet Union instead of an, let's say, not controllable, let's say, former Soviet republics. The big, huge problem was also the START Treaty, and to make sure that the nuclear weapons were controlled not by crazy new local politicians after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Second thing, I had like a little bit, let's say, experience on field for some reason that I will not tell you in this stream. But let's say that I'm normally in Russia 2 months a year minimum. And so I'm very well connected there. And not only I visited, for example, Transnistria, visited Tiraspol. I was there in 2014. And it's something that it's not understandable from people in the West or also in Asia that never went there. It's like a state that doesn't exist with their own government and with their own money. For example, in Tiraspol, you have money that it's not recognized everywhere in the world. And it's a little bit of thing that it's interesting to understand why these frozen conflicts are very important for the control of the outside border of former Soviet Union. If you will look, we will look to the map of where Tiraspol is put it. It was the western part of the former Soviet Union. So this is another short shot about my master in GIMO. It was a very good image that I wanted to share with you. Normally we think that there is a big war and a big, let's say, historically fight between Soviet Union and USA. On the left, you see that there is my group of master group GIMO in Moscow. On the right, you will see an image that few people knows. It's in Poverty Park. It's like the park of Victory Park of Moscow, with one Soviet soldier and one US soldier in a big hug, without the supply of a huge amount of weapon by US to the Soviet Union. For sure, the war probably had not, let's say, a so successful second phase in the Second World War. It was a great alliance between Soviet Union and USA. So it's different type of interpretation and history, and maybe the division of the world after Yalta created like these blocks that now it's more US and China. Russia, it's in my opinion, still a proxy state in this global war for the control of the economy. Super fast analysis of the war. I will give all the time to the other guests, but I will tell you my point of view, and I will put my questions. My point of view is that the war is in a lose-lose situation. If I have to look from a Russian point of view, the Russians are achieving very slowly, but they are achieving their initial goals. But the initial goals, you will see, it's not Donbass. The initial goals you will see in Russian internal propaganda, what was for sure was to take Kiev and to change the government. It didn't happen, so it was a failure. But in the Russian propaganda, also in West we have a lot of propaganda, so I'm not saying Russia is bad, West is good. Absolutely not. I made the presentation also for you to understand that I'm very well connected to Russia. It's not a secret. You will understand it. But my wife is Russian, so it's like I have this strange connection because I have a lot of connection there. But if we look to this map was the map that was going around a little bit before February 22nd. Not a lot of people have it, but in a Russian channel, it was like before the war. You will see it, what was the real intention of the war. And it's something that is nearly happening, but with a huge amount of cost that we will see at the end. It will worth it, and whatever. Other propaganda map that was going before the war, you can see it translated. It's like first level of citizenship. This is Russian that are talking about Ukraine, that Ukraine it's like divided in three types. First part that it's like, let's say, the western part of Ukraine. The central part of Ukraine, it's like the citizenship of second class, and the third part of Ukraine, it's like citizens of third class. You will see that third class, it's like the real objective of this special operation. So it's fake Donbass, Crimea, blah, blah, blah. This thing, it's the official information that you can find in every channel before the 24th of February. So let me see if it's okay. I had like one video, but it's not important. I will tell you later. The important thing that I will want to show you, it's about economical part. What it's important? It's important to understand if it's real changing the balance of export between Russia, India, and China, and what is happening and what will happen in Europe. For you to know, I stayed the last month in South and Central America and US for work. I'm not connected to anything that you could think. I'm a waste management specialist, so I'm specialized in separation of waste, increasing the level of separate collection, recycling, blah blah blah. But traveling a lot, it allows me to see in live things, not to watching from TV. What I saw, it's like the real level of inflation. It's higher than the let's say that the polls, the official data. I saw the prices. It's like skyrocketing also in South America and USA. But my point of view is that this thing started in 2020. It's not connected directly to the war. Also, this semester that it will arrive to for sure a recession phase in the second semester of this year. It started on February 2020, but with the funds of COVID, it was hidden technically. But the recession is already 2 years and a half. Let's see these things. About the Russian trades, you see that it's increasing, but from 2000, it's not from this year. Other important things, it's about the export and the type of export of gas. We can see that the states that has more problem because they are more dependent by Russia, they are not very important state, North Macedonia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Moldova, Finland, Latvia. The two states that will have a huge amount of problem. Let's say it's mine, Italy, but I will show you that we have some let's say alternatives. But the state with less alternatives is Germany, because Germany is in the north of Europe. It has no connection to Africa, and it doesn't have other alternative pipes. Now we are dealing with Israel, we're dealing directly with Egypt, with Algeria, Libya, directly with Azerbaijan. About Italy. Another data that it's important in the right chart, you will see that Russia is the first exporter in the world about gas, but the most important thing is that the gas is exported by pipeline mostly. Okay, if you check to Qatar, for example, that it's the third, the majority is by LNG, so it's transported by liquefied natural gas by ships. So you can ship everywhere without pipes. The infrastructure LNG in Russia is not mainly Russia, but it's Western company. This is a thing that you have to think that it's important. Oil you can transport with everything. Gas, no. So let's see where the Russian pipes go. You can see, also one child can see that 90% of the pipes of Russia going to west, not to east. So, if there is one question, the alliance with China and India can, let's say, supply the change of Europe in the dependence of Russia? At the moment, no. It's simply, look at this. There is like only one pipe that is power of Siberia that is going to China. All the rest of pipes are going to Europe. So it will be a huge problem for Russia to, if the European states will find, and they already find it, the most of them, the way how to reduce the dependence from Russian gas in the next 2 years. the other two provocations that I will give to you, it's about the real state of Russian economy. Okay, there is a huge debate about the value of rubles. The Russians were prepared about the sanction. Europe is so stupid and blah blah blah. But if you check about this, we will see that the inflation in Russia it's about 12 points more than in the Eurozone. And let's say that for a state with an average salary of about $400 per month, it's a huge problem to have an inflation with it's over 20%. Another thing is that if the ruble is strong, it's only because the people it's not able to buy and sell foreign currency freely. You can buy it if you want. There is a 20% commission, so nobody will do it because it's better to make like a bank account and you will have like about 15% of interest, but it will be like completely eroded by the 17% of inflation. At the same instance, we can check the data about the inflation in the Eurozone. You can see that it's increasing. Actually, in Italy, it's about 8%. It's the highest level of inflation from 1983. So this is an alarm that we have to understand. It's something that it's not sustainable long time for the Western economies. What is like the question that I will give to our speeches and also a provocation to you for the end? And I made only 15 minutes only to make a fast prologue to the speaker. The question that I'm asking to you is, one, is it worth this war? Because it's a lose-lose for both parts, except for the states that are outside that they can sell commodities, or China and India that they can buy commodities in discount. Look at the prices of buying of gas and oil of China and India and compare it to the prices in Europe. It means that Russia is selling a lot of quantity of material to East, but the problem is that there is no profit. So it's not affordable long time. How much, and this is the other question, and the provocation. The Biden administration, because we don't have to cheat about this, let's say the Biden administration and the US have, let's say, for sure, as goal the change of regime in Russia. But what I wanted to ask to you, are we sure that after Putin there will be someone better? Because if you will ask to anybody in the Russian society, first, there is not any good substitute. Second, if there will be any substitute, for sure it will be worse, because the problem it's that nobody that didn't live or study or have a direct connection in Russia can understand the Russian mindset. Russian mindset is completely different from the Western and also from the Asian It's completely different. We are very proud. And the other thing, and I will close it, the biggest difference between Western people and Russian people is that Western people are not ready to survive. Russian, yes. So if we think that we can, let's say, take the war in Ukraine in our side, taking out of the market the new iPhone from Russia, or let's say things that are not necessary, it will not happen because they don't care. Also, the new cars. Only in the two big cities you have a society that is similar to the West, that is Moscow and St. Petersburg. All the rest of Russia, it's another planet. So I close and I will pass the speech to New World Econ, to Jan. If you will have any type of question, send it to me, mail, YouTube, Facebook, and I will collect all the question and I will do it at the end of all the speech. So Jan, the speech is yours. Let me put you the stream. Okay, here we are.
Okay, can you hear me? Is my sound good?
Perfect.
Awesome. So, first off, thanks Stefano for organizing the event, and thanks to the other speakers for coming. Very excited to be here, and thanks for everyone in the audience that is attending as well. So, I think the first, what I want to focus on really is the situation in the world, kind of outside of the context of the war in Ukraine. And I think a lot of people kind of understand the base point here. And in this this unipolar moment in time, the unipolar world and the global free trade order that we have lived in our entire lives is actually in a state of collapse. I think some people see that and identify that, and I think a lot of people don't really realize it yet, and see that it could still be saved, I guess. But there's pretty significant debate on what's causing the collapse, and I would imagine that a lot of people would blame that on the current situation here with the war in Ukraine. Of course, as you guys have probably heard, most of the food supply in the world actually comes from Russia and Ukraine, or I guess the best way to look at it is the agricultural output of Ukraine is probably enough to feed a population close to 20 times the size of Ukraine. So it's got 40 million people. Um, I'm probably way overshooting the number here, but I believe the food products coming from Ukraine alone feed closer to like 600 million people abroad. So huge breakdown in globalization and trade there for the system that we're running being unable to feed large parts of the world. So a lot of people would blame this on the situation between uh, or on this war, but I would argue very much that it was well on the way to collapse already, and the war is more of a symptom of that collapse. So, getting into it, the primary thing is demographics, you could say, or I'm sorry, let me go back a little bit. Best place to start is really to understand how the order came about. It was established in the late stages of World War II in 1945 between the Western Allies, excluding Russia. And the idea of it was that America was pretty worried about the prospect of a future war with Russia and Europe. I think at the time, American command structures had kind of done the math and realized that they were vastly outnumbered by the Soviet armies in that were stationed in eastern parts of Europe, and not only that, they had seen significantly more combat than the American forces did. Very very much more. I guess you could say experienced. They fought a tougher enemy on the Eastern Front than the Americans did on the Western Front, and they fought a longer war too. So they were far more prepared. They had larger forces to come with. So one thing that the Allies needed from America was they needed to rebuild. But not only did they need to rebuild, but they needed somewhere to sell their goods, and they needed access to markets mainly in order to help with the growth in the rebuilding of their countries. So it was kind of a quid pro quo, I guess you can say, between the U.S. and its allies. The U.S. opened up global markets and promised to defend global sea lanes in order for those countries that were rebuilding to um, sell their goods into the United States, which was really the only place to sell anything at the time. So we, in exchange, wanted security from these countries, or we wanted them to be our allies. So if we ever got in a war with the Soviet Union, they would step in and fight side by side with us, basically. There this After that, sometime after that, the creation of NATO was formed, and but the main first step to that was the global free trade order. So what's important to know about that is it's not America never really bet their economy into into the system, and I can show you a graphic on this a little bit later in the video. But America is actually the least trade dependent economy in the entire world. 80% of all the economy in America is actually internal. It's made here, it's bought here, etc. And of the largest trading partners that we have, the three largest are Mexico, Canada, and China in that order. So the majority of our international trade is actually moving across land borders within America. So uh, there's pretty low commitment to the order economically, and that'll come in important later. So, for one of the main reasons why the order is failing is because at its base, it really doesn't make sense anymore. And a big part of that is demographics, and by demographics, really what I'm talking about is population collapse. And this is the alarm is being sounded on this by several geopolitical speakers out there, authors and billionaires. Off the top of my head, the biggest guy is Peter Zion. I've read a lot of his work. Some other good opinions out there for sure. George Friedman is one, I would say. John Mearsheimer has some points about the Ukraine war that I certainly agree with, but I'm sure there's things that each of them say that I don't necessarily agree with. So hopefully I'll get to that. But as far as population collapse go, a really great book, um, or really about the collapse of the trade order would be a book written by Ray Dalio recently. I can't really remember the title of it. I didn't have this part ready for you guys. Another person that's been sounding the alarm on this is Elon Musk, billionaire business owner in the United States. But let me get into demographics and why it's important real quick. So, uh, you know, it's basically the study or looking at population structures in terms of age, right? So at the bottom, you have people from you have newborns to 20-year-olds. They don't have jobs. They consume goods at a Pac-Man scale, basically. So someone has to support them, and generally that's the next generation up, your 20 to 40-year-olds. They have the highest level of spendings. Not only are they buying things for themselves, they're raising kids. They're buying cars, they're buying houses. If you go to college, you have massive amount of debts. It's all forms of spending. So this is what drives your modern consumption-based economy, which is what most economies in the world have been for the last 80 years. So in order for free trade to make sense, these economies, or basically you produce a good, you put it on international markets, and guaranteed there's a buyer, right? So because populations continue to grow, markets continue to grow, demand for goods continue to grow. So the next level up, your 40 to 60-year-olds, this is where the dynamic of demographics interacting with an economy really changes. So these tend to be the highest paid workers. You've been in your job for 20 years, so getting higher pay means you're paying in higher levels to income tax. So the government loves you. You're the most productive. Your boss loves you. You've been doing your job for 20 years, so whatever it is, whether you're putting together computers, developing software, manufacturing Volkswagens, building aircraft, after 20 years, you're pretty damn good at your job, right? So most productive workers, the least amount of spending. Once you get into this age group, kids generally have already moved out of the house for the most part. So least amount of spending. You probably already have a house. You've probably already paid that off. You probably got a car. You've probably paid off your college expenses as well. So less spending. So this generates a lot of like surplus capital. So most of the money in the world is actually controlled by this group, and you can best define this as baby boomers and Gen Xers right now. So, and I would primarily lean towards baby boomers because the Gen Xer demographic group is much smaller. The majority of these people are baby boomers, and after that point, you move into retirement. So, or I'm sorry, one more point to go with that. Most of this extra money that you're saving up between 40 and 60 ends up going into the stock markets. So not only does this age group of people, they drive productivity, they drive tax revenue, and they drive financial markets. Three main points to consider there. So once you get depending on whatever country you're in, into your 60s, probably around 65, or some countries have lower retirement ages, some have higher retirement ages. But you no longer have a job, you're retired, so you're not paying income tax anymore. Uh, you're withdrawing Social Security, so you're actually taking money away from the government. So in all technicality, retirees are a net drag on the system. You're not a net drag as a person. We all still love you. You earned your position. Like you've had a long life, you've worked hard, and this is what you've earned. This is pretty well established within Western society. But from an economic standpoint, once you've reached these ages, you're no longer contributing to the system in terms of productivity taxes, or even financially. Once you retire, you end up drawing a lot of your money out of stocks. So net drag on the system. And why is that important? Why is it important for to have a stable population? So looking at what that translates into, you get when you graph it out, you get a pyramid. So these are, I ripped these off straight from Wikipedia. Seem to be they're relatively accurate, give or take some. But we're going to look at the bottom one. I'm going to use Argentina as a good example because it's very unrelated to world events right now. It's actually a pretty isolated country in terms of its position in the world. But one thing that's unique about it is it has a near perfect demographic structure. You have large populations of young people at the bottom of the pyramid that drive consumption, drive spending, and drives growth. So this type of economy um, is very good for growth in tax revenue, growth in economics just in general. They have a relatively large older experienced worker cohort. Argentina actually does have a very skilled workforce. So this is good. They can produce a lot of goods that can easily be absorbed by their younger generations. In fact, they probably can't produce enough to satisfy the demand here. So a country like Argentina would need to import a lot of goods in order to sustain its economy, which is good for globalization. Some countries that produce surpluses have somewhere to export their goods to. And then they have, relatively small group of older adults that withdraw money from the system. But overall, in the big picture, a system like this is going to make more money than it's going to spend. It's got a pretty good future ahead of it. So in terms of the rest of the world, this is actually a very rare. This is what most countries looked like after World War II and into the 50s and 60s. They had very stable demographic structures. Most populations were growing. All economies were growing. Um, Now most or countries actually look more like Germany. So the problem with this is one, you have a top heavy demographic system. You have more old people than you do young people. So since these are the groups of people towards the top that produce and pay the most into the tax system, there isn't enough population in the lower parts of the pyramid to absorb the production of the upper parts, right? So Germany has to export their goods. And this wouldn't be such a big problem. It would probably work if it weren't for the fact that most countries in the world look exactly the same as this. There's very few countries that look like Argentina. To be honest with you, you have Argentina, America, and France, basically out of modern industrial economies that have a similar demographic, like a healthy demographic structure, and they cannot absorb the production of Germany, Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, China, all these, a lot of these other, Japan is like another big one. Japan actually reached this stage of demographic decline first in the 90s. That's the Japanese financial collapse that you can read about, and they're probably the golden standard for how to handle a situation like this. They've somehow managed over the last 30 years to achieve stagnant growth, so basically no growth in the economy after you account for inflation, and that's pretty good. Right? I mean, it's much better than a decline in economy, but they did that in one of the most stable periods of world history. So, Germany is in a far worse position, as Stefano described. With their resources and industry, they're kind of in a bad spot, and we're going to get a little bit more into that at a later point. So, uh, the point here is there's too much production globally, and not enough consumption. The places of the world that are growing either can't absorb extra goods from abroad or aren't wealthy enough to absorb the type of goods that are being created. So think African countries, think India, large growing populations, but they're not out buying Mercedes. They're not that wealthy. So or they're not buying high-end Japanese products as well. So big problems structurally in globalization, as far as economy works, and there's also big problems in the system in terms of America's commitment to it. So, like I said, this was originally built as a system to counter the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union's gone. It's been gone for 30 years, and while the American government might have some like big things to say about holding the order together and stabilizing things, the actions of the U.S. government have not been so over the last 30 years. After Bush Senior, like Stefano pointed out, he was actually one of the last uh, American presidents that understood the world and at a level of grand strategy, I guess you could say. And he was voted out of office, and every president since then, whether they've been Democrat or Republican, have largely been focused on American issues and have ignored the rest of the world, and they've let this trade order and the global community deteriorate. So while statements, from my view, while statements about how uh, globalization needs to be saved, and we're going to do everything we can to stop the Russians and save the global world order, um, yeah, I think it's probably too little too late for that. So politically, domestically in America, there's been some not a lot of support for this system either. Most of the support for maintaining this current system actually comes from the technocratic bureaucratic class of America. So like the people that grew up their whole lives studying, they had parents that were politicians or worked in DC, and they've worked their whole lives for this job, and they know everything there is about it from a scientific point of view, right? And they see the way they see the situation basically is after 1991, this great game that's been going on in the world, this conflict of nations that's lasted throughout history, was basically over, and we won. And all that was needed was for us to basically maintain the current system. Well, I mean, that's a very I'm not going to say a foolish view, because like based on the way things were currently going, that they were just like kind of moving with like inertia. So like you can't really be blamed for thinking that history was over basically. But in reality, when you look at the history of man through the last 50,000 years while we've been Homo sapiens, right? Like we haven't changed one bit, like we write more things down generally than we used to, but humans still behave basically in the same way and they have basically the same brain capacity. So biologically, I don't think that humanity will ever be done with fighting each other, which is very unfortunate. I wish it was. I certainly wish it was the other way. But the problem with viewing the world in that way is there's no grand strategy for anything. There was no plan for the future of the United States, and people in the United States can attest to this. There hasn't been anything laid out by either party for the last 30 years, a comprehensive plan for the next 100 years, what our plan is internationally. It seems to change every 4 years and goes back and forth, and even every 8 years or 12 years, once another party like retakes control, they change their plan entirely. So getting into the breakdown. So I mean, the basic structure of the rules based order was it allowed for competition within certain limits. So, no taking what you need from others. Like business competition is good, but the main thing was under no circumstance can you interfere with international shipping. For globalization to work, not only do you need like the right types of economies for it to work, but you also need an environment where these slow-moving large ships can get from point A to point B as cheaply as possible, which means as unharassed as possible. So obviously, large ships need insurance. Obviously, if one of the largest super tankers in the world gets hijacked by pirates, that's not good for the insurance companies. So rates go up, shipping costs go up. So pirates, is definitely like a big thing to look for. And we've probably, most people have heard a lot about pirates off the coast of Africa, especially the coast of East Africa in the last decade or so. And I want to point to these charts here. Like we said in the beginning, uh, part of the U.S. commitment to this global free trade order was patrolling the seas, and we maintained not only the largest navy in the history of the world, but basically the only navy in the world for a very long time. And that was sufficient up until about this bulge here after the end of the Cold War, where America began to downsize its Navy. So I want to emphasize here, in case anyone from the Navy is watching, I don't mean to offend. Uh, the Navy is certainly at its most powerful point in history in terms of like military power. You got 11 super carriers, of which the rest of the world has. Um, Two, three, maybe now after China has launched its newest carrier. I would argue the British carriers are in fact not super carriers. They're a little bit undersized for that. The Japanese carriers, of which they have four, a little bit better, but they don't even consider them carriers right now. So but they can be easily converted to hold a number of F-35s and stuff. But the point is the size of the surface fleet has shrunk enough to where the spread of the U.S. Navy and their ability to respond to threats of piracy is significantly diminished. So if you'll notice here, 1991, kind of the key year. Looking at the graph on the bottom, this is statistics on incidents of piracy from 1984 to 2012. Significant increases in piracy there. This has caused significant increases in the costs of shipping through time, which is a big deal because it's created a situation where it's cheaper to manufacture goods now in the home country for many countries than it is to ship them in from abroad. And that's not an immediate change. It takes time. Like obviously you build a factory, you make that investment, it might cost you $1 billion to build let's just say a steel foundry, right? So let's say that labor cost and shipping cost eventually makes it above what you would calculate it to be if you would have built that steel foundry in your own country. Shit, we made a mistake. It would be nice if we had this factory here, but it's going to cost you another $1 billion to build a new factory, right? So you're going to keep using that other steel factory in the foreign country to make your steel until the point where you've saved up enough money and it makes more and more sense to build a new factory and move it home. So you're starting to see that in America now. There's a significant number of steel mills under production, or under construction in America. A lot of that industry is going to move back, if not to America, to Mexico, where labor costs are slightly lower. So there was a significant drop in piracy after 2012, but this was because of a specific concerted effort from nations to curb this situation, and probably in an effort to cling on to the globalized system. All right, so we're going to move on to Russia, and basically, like, the point I've laid out here for you is globalization has been ending for some time. There have been people writing about this situation for some time, and the Russians caught on to it at some point in time and developed a plan. And I would argue that they're merely just a step ahead, really. I think that the conflicts that are going to spring up in the world are going to be many, and they're going to last for quite some time. I'm not suggesting by any means that there's going to be a world war, but there's certainly going to be um, a couple wars, several wars in the next decade or so, and they're all going to continue this trend in affecting the global trade. So Russia, has a similar demographic problem to uh, the rest of the industrialized world. It's very centered around the rate of urbanization. Most of Russia's population was moved into the cities. During Soviet times, they were moved into cramped up apartments, where you're going to have less kids. There's just less space, less money available, less resources to raise them. So it's not nearly as declined as Germany's is, but this is what a dying people looks like. Some of the worst parts of this demographic structure are closer to the bottom of the pyramid, the newborns. Russians just aren't having kids. On top of that, something that's unseen here in this pyramid is the Russians that are having kids are not actually Russian. They're they're Chechen, they're Dagestani, they are Tatars. There's all the minorities that live in the countrysides and some of the southern regions of Russia are the ones that are actually growing in population, while ethnic Russians themselves are decreasing in um, population far quicker. So part of the reason why Russia made this move in 2022 is this bulge right here. This is the bulge of or I guess it's really this bulge right here. This is one of the last chances they got to be able to field an army large enough to reach out and make a move at this sort of level. So hopefully that explains that. If they wait much longer, they're not going to have enough young people to man a defense force that's a million strong and 2 million strong in terms of reserves, which really is undersized for what the Russian territory needs. And at the end of this, I'm going to show you guys real quick what the Russia's strategic goals are and everything. So the likely goal of Russia's military moves are border security, and as if you remember that map that Stefano showed at the very beginning of the old Soviet borders, that's going to come into play here soon. I'll try to get to that real quick, but Russia is a big, wide open land. They've been invaded 50 some odd times throughout their history. They don't like that, obviously. And you might think that an invasion is very unlikely now because of nuclear weapons. Like, no one's going to, take that risk of getting nuked by Russia. But the case of border security, I would remind you, is not merely just about invasions. It's also about like movement of peoples, goods, and ideas. So case in point, Poland just finished building a large steel barrier on its border to Belarus due to the movement of refugees and migrants that made it up into Russian territory from Afghanistan and the wars in the Middle East, and moved to the west to try to get to Europe. So, Russia has every bit of interest in stemming the flow of migrants in, as they do an interest of pushing the migrants on out and into Europe. So it likely that's part of it. Another big part of border security is definitely the idea space. Russia, with this kind of demographic structure, with the increase in population of minorities and the decrease in population of Russia, really throws the dynamic of Russia out of balance, and they're likely going to experience some very serious internal issues in the future. So. Um, Best case scenario, or kind of like playing the devil's advocate, if Putin thinks he's doing the right thing, it's likely that he thinks he's securing his borders to prevent outside interference from, picking sides in any kind of internal Russian conflicts that will certainly take place in the future. Worst case scenario, he's a psychopath that's pounding his chest, right? Which I don't think, I don't think that's necessarily the case. In like a kind of like a quick view of Putin, he seems to be, in my mind, one of the more intelligent people within the Russian political sphere. That's not to say I like him. I think he's very, very dangerous person, probably one of the most dangerous people alive. So we're going to get to that map of Russian goals in just a minute. The political strategy of Russia in this situation is kind of obvious. Their goal really right now is to band together a disgruntled group of nations united by nothing more than their loathing for the U.S. And I say it like this because there's literally nothing else the countries that are siding with Russia have in common. They actually, many of them don't like each other. India and China are two big ones. They fought wars. They have active border disputes with each other. And you might think it's strange that I'm lumping India into that group. India and South Africa are two of them that Russia is going after as potential allies. And the reason being is less because they have like active beef with the U.S., but it's more of like a cultural beef with colonialism. Um, as you know, South Africa used to be apartheid, so after they got out of that, current South African government, and likely any South African government to get elected in the future, is very anti-colonialism, which America's been painted as a colonialist power. The truth in that is I don't agree with. I think America actually did a lot of work to end a lot of colonialism. Um, i.e. 1956 Suez Crisis. If you guys want some more facts on that, just look that up. But India, same position, very anti-colonialism, does not, have any personal beef with the U.S., but they have beef with our grandparents, which you can say is the United Kingdom, which occupied India for a long time. So there is potential for Russia to flip the script on America and get a lot of these other countries on their side. But there equally is still a lot of India has a lot to lose for going again, explicitly against the United States. They're probably more likely to remain neutral. But the goal of all this is to create a new multipolar, a world order, and where that's the hopes of the Russians. So in terms of Europe and energy, Germany, is a good case in point. Is probably the most vulnerable country in the world to Russian demands. Germany doesn't have. You guys saw that graphic that Stefano had about the uh, oil and gas, or mainly it was just gas, like whether it was pipeline or liquefied natural gas. I believe at this point in time, Germany is constructing but does not have any LNG terminals within their country. So any LNG that gets to Germany, which mind you is more expensive than piped natural gas has to come through another country like the Netherlands or Poland, which is obviously going to take a cut out of the profits for that. So the price is going to go up even higher before it gets to Germany. The problem here is, outside of energy and heating is also petrochemicals. And you're already starting to see that in Germany, where the price of gas has gotten so high that some of the largest petrochemical industries are starting to collapse. So um, the way I see it, if Russia had a chance at breaking up NATO, it's Germany, and it's a lot higher chance than you think. Germany has to decide whether they morally want to stick with the West, and or if they want to, save their economy, save their jobs, save their people from freezing in their homes and go with Russia. So it's a very tough position that Germany is in right now. Um, I will point out that I state here that that Russia's using energy to hold people hostage. Uh, it certainly seems like that's what's going on with Nord Stream right now. But I will say that the strategy of the EU and the West has not done this any favors. They've actually been really holding themselves hostage with sanctioning a lot of Russian goods, which we're going to get into that in a second. So, the Ukrainian strategy for the defense against Russia, is really it's two parts. And the first, the military part is to hold a defensive line at geographically advantageous positions. The Donbass is very hilly terrain. It's not the best, but it's far more defensive than the rest of Ukraine. It's very flat, very, very flat territory. But the northern Donbass is dissected by the Seversky Donets River, which rivers do make good geographic barriers. So, what you've seen with the Ukrainian defense is they have, built up pretty extensive fortifications within the hilly terrain and the southern Donbass, and they have engaged in a fighting, kind of a mobile retreat and defense in the territories beyond the river, and they've focused on trying to hold the river in the north. Um, so this can't last forever. Obviously, Russia has, and this has been stated by the Ukrainians. They have superiority in equipment, 20-1. They have what seems to be a superiority in firepower in terms of artillery of 40-1 from what the Ukrainians have said. But also, a statement to go with that. It seems like the Ukrainians are firing somewhere under 7,000 artillery shells a day, where the Russians are firing 75,000 or above. So that's the disparity on the battlefield, which eventually will lead to a collapse in the current lines. It's just a matter of when. So the other part of their strategy is to dominate the information space. It seems like Ukraine has taken up a lot of American influence in terms of psyops. They are trying to consolidate, obviously, Ukrainian public support and political support for defense of the war. They've made some questionable moves here, not in terms of achieving that goal, but in terms of achieving their goal of eventually joining NATO or the EU. You guys have probably seen Ukraine actually, has banned a lot of political parties, which is very anti-democratic, and they've also banned a lot of dissenting news media, and they actually combined all of the news stations into a single state-run media conglomerate for the sake of national defense, which you can argue is necessary for sure. I mean, the Soviet Union obviously was doing some very similar stuff for their defense in World War II, but it's not a good path into NATO. So doing that, combining that media and spreading that media throughout the world, they're trying to win the hearts and minds of Westerners. And the goal here is to win political support over within Europe and within the U.S. in order to I guess kind of wiggle their way into NATO or the EU, or bare minimum to get the weapons they need to win the war. And from the next graphic, I would argue the chances of this strategy succeeding are slim and getting slimmer. So this is the NATO-U.S. strategy, and real quick to review through that, I'm going to try to speed up here. I've been talking for a while, so I apologize for that. But the U.S. strategies to try to prevent the collapse of the global trade order, which I would argue is a very flawed strategy. However, NATO is not explicitly tied into the World Trade Order. So, strengthening NATO and preventing the collapse of NATO is a very valid strategy. So, I will say that. And then to weaken Russia, both, that's two faceted. One on the military front to supply arms to Ukraine. Basically, the more weapons they give Ukrainians, the longer it's going to take Russia to achieve its objectives. So, stalling Russia, dragging Russia into a long war of attrition is the goal here. And I don't think there's anyone seriously in the American government that thinks that Ukraine they can provide enough arms to Ukraine uh, to help to actually make them win the war. I think the strategy here is perhaps to drag the war out long enough so political support in Russia diminishes, and maybe Russia goes into a civil war of its own, or maybe some people force Putin to stop the war, or maybe even Putin is deposed. There's been a lot of ideas floated out there. I don't see any of them as being likely. So the political from the political and economic aspect, the sanctions strategy has been to weaken the Russian economy. Stefano talked a little bit about uh, you know what's going on with the ruble and inflation, and while I agree inflation, the numbers are factual. Inflation is higher. It is a combined number of all the goods in Russia, and the inflation is mainly in those high value goods, cell phones, computers, drones, things like that. You know, cars, a lot of value added manufacturing stuff. The price has really skyrocketed in Russia, but a lot of the goods that are necessary for survival, food, energy, prices are dropping, or they're staying very stable. So the strategy of changing the course of direction for Russia using these things is not going to work in my opinion. So, and then internationally, the strategy is to curb the growth of Russian influence, and specifically, envoys are constantly sent out from Europe and America to BRICS countries to try to win them over, which we don't know what those conversations are like, but they don't appear to be very positive. So I'm going to skip this last slide. Hopefully, from what Stefano's presentation was, and what DPA has upcoming, you guys will get into that. But real quick, I'm going to show you what we're talking about as far as Russian grand strategy on the military aspect, and Ukrainian grand strategy. So this is Russia, obviously, and the green territory marked is core Russian territory, and this is what they want to protect and what they want to defend at all costs, right? So if you look at, I mean, you can debate on how valid their strategy is all you want, but looking into this, it's definitely the course that they're going on, and I'll show you. Um, and so these areas I've marked are the gateway territories into Russia, and everything in between them is impassable terrain. Deserts are good, mountains are better, oceans are best. Obviously those are three significant geographic borders for an army to cross. The first one that Russia secured was what we're going to call the Dagestan Caucasus Gap, and this was secured at the end of the Chechen Wars. So there's no issues with any kind of border incursions here. The second, we're going to go ahead and call the Sochi Caucasus Gap, or I guess you can call it the Abkhazia Gap. This was secured after the 2008 invasion of Georgia. So no southern threat from any kind of future Turkish invasion, if it were ever to happen, or if it were even possible. The next is probably one of the most important for the Russians, and that is the Crimea whoever controls the Crimea controls the economic destiny of the entire territory of Eurasia. You can block and interdict any kind of trade in the Black Sea, and it's there's a pretty good argument for whoever controls this peninsula controls the Black Sea literal itself. And this is you know, this is stated throughout history that this peninsula has changed hands many times between the Turks and the Russians and Golden Horde and different groups like that. So the next one, which is one of little consequence now, but will certainly be a flashpoint in the future, is the Central Asian corridor. Not to get too deep into this, but the Uzbeks do not like the Russians, and it's one of the few populations in the world that is actually growing. There's millions of Uzbeks outside of the country of Uzbekistan, and it's a very authoritarian country. So you can imagine that there will probably, in a world where there is a lot of wars and a lot of military action, Uzbekistan could potentially be one of those locations. The next one is the Tian Altai Gap, which is the corridor between Kazakhstan and China, which was arguably secured by the Russians in their intervention in January of 2022 this year during what seemed like a popular Kazakh uprising. So the Bessarabian Gap, Ukraine is definitely an obstacle on the way here. Russia does have troops pre-positioned in Transnistria, which is right here, is Tiraspol, but invasions have come and gone from Turkey through this gap here. So it's important for the Russians to secure it, or bare minimum to secure it because of migration. So Poland is probably the most troublesome gap, and the ones that the Russians are the most paranoid by. This is where the worst invasions have come from. Think Napoleon, think the Germans, World War I, think the Poles and the Polish-Russian War right after World War I, World War II, Hitler, obviously. This is where the most death and devastation to Russian culture and the Russian people has come from. It's come from Poland. So Russia's goal is to somehow prevent any future incursion into Russia from this territory. And lastly, the Balkan states, which we know are very hostile to Russia. Russia obviously would like to push up to the sea here, where it would be much more difficult for a seaborne invasion into Russia. The other thing that's really important here is its proximity to St. Petersburg, which is the cultural capital of Russia. So there's bad blood between Russia and these countries, and strategically, Russia would like to occupy this territory. So hopefully you can see that there is a trend certainly in Russia and their efforts to secure these territories. And the last thing I want to show you guys before I turn it over to DPA is the Ukrainian strategy real quick here so you can see it visually. This is the hilly part of Donbass. This is where the defensive lines have been built up over the past 8 years for the Ukrainians. And then in the northern part of the Donbass, you have the Seversky Donetsk River, which they have used as a geographic barrier to hold back the Russians. So you can kind of obviously see how the battlefield has shaped to what it is now. It's very close to what this looks like today, with the Russians making slow and steady gains. So sorry for going a little over on the time there. That's the end of my presentation. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Wyatt.
Okay, thank you a lot. I'm collecting all the questions from YouTube and also from Facebook, but mostly is from YouTube. I will give immediately the standard to DPA. Jan, the presentation was amazing, very different from the other presentation that we got. At the end, we will return on a lot of questions that we have for you. So, DPA, if you want to start, the stand is yours. Also, if you want to share anything, I will give to you. Okay, here we are. So,
Okay,
Yo.
hello everyone. This is Defense Politics Asia, and sorry, my voice closed after uh, not talking for 1 hour plus. So okay, so today I won't be doing a PowerPoint presentation. So it's good, just nice. The other two speakers have a very comprehensive presentation on the geopolitical and economic side, which I love. So I was enjoying myself actually. So today I'll be talking more about uh, the situation that's on the ground now, and what I think we're going to be happening in the future, and some speculation about what might be the Russians trying to do or want to do. My I got three screens, so my face will be here, so it'll be a bit weird. No, actually, I can just move my camera. Sorry. Oops. Okay, so the situation now, if for those that didn't follow my channel, if this map might be a bit not very familiar with you. So the situation now is not looking very good for the Ukrainians. The war now is mostly now in the eastern side, in the Luhansk and the Donetsk Oblast. So this area here is Luhansk Oblast. This area is the Donetsk Oblast. Oblast basically just the region, and the Russians also captured a huge area, maybe 30% of the Kharkiv region, around 70% of the Zaporizhia region, and basically almost the entire of Kherson. So the Russians are already doing the process of absorbing Kherson and Zaporizhia region into the Russian Federation. They have already converted the currency over in this region into the rubles. So and they are doing all the government things there. So you can definitely be sure that the Russians are not going to let go of this region. They are already also offering a Russian passport to the people in this region as well. So by all these actions, you will know that the Russians are going to be here for good. So um, on the eastern front, most of this front, as you can see, all these blue icons, these are actually entrenchments. You can see some of these entrenchment in the Google Maps. Sorry, let me find some good ones. These are all terrible. Got bigger ones. Come on, give me a good one. Okay, so for example, this one. So all these entrenchment are before the war. So these are all, and we are not even sure this satellite image is taken when. So over the past 8 years, the Ukrainians have built a stupid amount of entrenchment, and all these blue fortress icons are all the entrenchment that are still not yet overrun by the Russian forces, which means that there's actually a lot more that you are not seeing that was already deleted by me over the course of the war. So which means that this line here, you can see this entire line is actually extremely well defended by the Ukrainian side, which is why this front line here has not really been moving much for the past 3 months. The so in fact, even this part, the Russian Defense Ministry was actually surprisingly very open. They shared about their progress, because they were actually moving up very fast here over the western side of Donetsk, and they had this uh, daily report that actually show all the entrenched position of the Ukrainians. And then surprisingly, after that presentation, they got stuck. They did not get a single progress, and then they stopped doing that entirely. The Russians stopped showing Ukrainian positions because they realized that they cannot actually go through. And these positions have been stuck here for 3 months. So this is the situation in terms of the Ukrainians. They are actually very, very good at defending what they have. However, the Russians are overwhelmingly more powerful in terms of the artillery and the missile abilities, the ability to destroy supply hubs, fuel, and everything. So eventually they got weathered down, and the Russians continued to push. They have captured several Donetsk, and now this is the only last major city left in the Luhansk region. And as per the current situation, the Russians are already in the city. they are doing this pincer movement right in the middle of the city. They can actually cross the river over here. They capture the heliport. There's a heliport here, and then there's another push over here around the concrete products as well as this Minokov mine. And they're actually going to close up and then encircle this entire Ukrainian force in the central and southern of Lysychansk. And not just this, there is a river crossing on both sides, on the west and the northern side of Privilia. They have already captured Privilia. They're going to push back. Information from a DPA viewer who has a friend actually serving in the, I think, Luhansk People's Republic force. They say that they already moved, their division is moving over to this area, which means that they are going to capture Novorossiysk very soon. There's a force pushing from the south up here. So there is fighting already in the outskirts, I guess. And I just saw some information, which I haven't do the digging for today yet. Shepelivka seems to have fallen to the Russians, which means that this area might also have been encircled by now. So this area here, I think, constitute around 4,000 over troops. And most of these troops are very well experienced. Are the experienced troops, the special forces, many of the foreign fighters. I'm not sure how many of them actually managed to escape. And I also saw in hints that they are fighting at Bilohorivka based on all my viewers' comments. So the situation is looking very bad for the Ukrainians. The new line of defense is going to be from Sivers, this area, Sivers, this town here, all the way stretching all around this, all the way this highway down to Bakhmut. This is actually will be the new line. And they are also holding very well south of Bakhmut here, because you can see the stupid amount of entrenchment here. So the Russians are actually stuck at Vashina, Kleinov. They can't even capture Novoluhansk or the power plant over here at the Pulehiska. So this is also a show of how difficult it is to overcome all this entrenchment. So the likelihood is that the Russian will put their focus on destroying or capture the entire force here, and then they will then, I guess, they might actually start to do a crossing on the top here to capture, to encircle all these forces. I don't think they will do a frontal, but of course that depends on what the Russians going to do. So the Russians have been changing tactics. They have been deciding not to attack the major city directly. They actually try to do encirclement, which then force the Ukrainian troops to panic and then escape. They did this at to Svilodarsk. Svilodarsk is actually one of the very, very well entrenched position, and they actually held this position for the past entire 8 years. And the Donetsk People's Republic forces has failed many attempts to try to capture this city. However, when the Russians push on the northern side, when they capture this Vodizhenka and then pushing to Mironivka, the troops here actually just retreated up away from the city to prevent encirclement. And then they started to do this very often. The Russian, after they started to push northward here, and now they are forcing a retreat out of Lysychansk, because all these city areas are actually very loved by the Ukrainian forces to defend, because it's very hard to take an urban area, and they have proved that like in Mariupol, it's really difficult to capture. Even Mariupol took some time to capture, even though it's actually considered quite fast for even modern warfare standard, but it actually gave the Russians a lot of headache. And so the Ukrainians was actually betting on trapping the Russians in Severodonetsk. However, I think there is some, I think it's a command breakdown. A lot of the Ukrainian troops are not getting supplies, and then they just retreated from the residential area, which then the Russians quickly captured. And then the Ukrainians quickly sent in more experienced forces, and then they hold up on the Azot plant. And then what we saw is that the Russians actually move around and then encircle the plant, and they have no choice but they actually to escape again. Then they cross over to Lysychansk. But while they're crossing, the Russians are already developing a new encirclement over here. So this is the new way of how the Russians are dealing with heavily entrenched cities. They are not doing head-on, they are actually doing encirclement, causing a rout of sorts. So because not every soldier is going to be so brave, so a lot of the units actually just give up, they surrender, some they just escape, they desert, and then leaving some only the troops that are still following the orders, and then that makes it easier for the Russians to actually push into the urban area. And this progress for the past 1-2 weeks is crazily fast. It's really fast. In a way, you can actually also state that the Ukrainian forces has been routed around this area. So the only reason why they are still not captured is because they have nowhere to run, so they're still defending. In the other places, the Ukrainians are still holding up these positions. So there is no progress, especially south of Izium. The Ukrainians are holding these positions very strongly. The Russians has been stuck here for 2-3 months as well. So it's not all over for Ukraine, but in the long run, my own opinion is it's not possible to beat the Russians, unfortunately, as much as the pro-Ukrainian crowd or the Western, pro-Western or anti-Russian crowd like to think. We can see this problem through how all this foreign aid, all these new equipment that is sent to Ukraine. They are not so usually. For example, let's say I'm going to send a division worth of tanks to Ukraine, or maybe a battalion worth of tanks to Ukraine. You may want to develop an entire new battalion, a new unit, and then you move forward. But what I'm witnessing for myself, other than the artillery, which they are doing that, they have been pushing all these armored vehicles and tanks. Tanks, I think no more tanks nowadays, but mostly armored vehicle immediately to the front. So from the announcement that they are given to the Ukrainians or arrive in Ukraine, they are witnessed on the front and was destroyed on the front within a week. So which also means that the Ukrainians are actually having heavy equipment problems. They are not having enough heavy equipment like armored vehicles. I don't think I think they are severely having insufficient tanks, and they are having decent amount of artillery, but the artilleries are getting destroyed on a daily basis as well. So my personal gut feeling is that the defenses might fall very quickly from now on, because once you have this thing fall, then this entire front that is like maybe 60-70 kilometers long will all congregate into a line that is just 30 kilometers long. That means the Russian forces will double in strength per kilometer across this line. And if they concentrate more on maybe one position, they were able to blitz through and encircle, for example, Sivas. Or they might actually go for other places. I'm not sure. So this is the situation in terms of the battle situation now. The other big news was that the Russians actually retreated from the Snake Island. I actually created a video today talking about this. The summary is that the Russians are actually unable to hold the town, the island, because of, in my opinion, because of barrel artillery. They have the 155 mm, the Caesar artillery. They have the M777s, and you can't really shoot down artillery shells. So I think that is what caused the Russians to actually give up this position. However, that doesn't mean the Ukrainians actually captured the Snake Island, because they themselves do not have the naval superiority to actually land. And if they are there, then they will just be a missile target. So, but the Russians actually put a statement saying that because now we are out of the island, the Ukrainian side can no longer use the Russian position at the Snake Island as an excuse to not export grain from the ports in Odessa. So that is actually the biggest thing. It's not actually the capturing of the island, but it's actually the Russians losing this position, yet they turn it into a trap for the Ukrainians. They're actually saying that now you have no more excuses. In the north, northwestern side of Black Sea, you now have control. Now you can actually export your grains, but to export the grain, the Ukrainians will have to demine their own coastline and the ports, because they actually dropped a stupid amount of mines in their port area, and causing a lot of problems for civilian vessels. The civilian vessels all do not dare to move, and they are also forbidden by the Ukrainian authorities to leave the ports. So now the Russians now daring the Ukrainians to start exporting through the sea route, and I view this as a double trap. First, if the Ukrainians start to use the naval route, then they will piss off all the partners that spend all this money building the new railway tracks through Romania, through Moldova, because they are actually trying to deliver all the grains through the land route, right? And then there is also another train route going through Romania to, I think, one of these locations. I forgot which city. To actually export the grain, and then they already committed the money to build the train route. So if they can suddenly export through the ports, then all these countries will actually lose the profits that comes with this. So that's one thing. Another thing is that if they remove all the mines, then the Russians will have a easier time to do an amphibious landing to attack Odessa. So it's a kind of a trap. Yet, so now the situation is the Ukrainians will not be able to use this as an excuse to prevent the global food crisis. And if they do not open the port and use this, then Ukraine will be condemned for not using the port, because the Russians have already withdrawn from this region. So it's a kind of a weird situation, but I believe that the Ukrainians will just continue to keep the status quo. They will not demine the coast. They will just say that the Russians continue to use the Black Sea fleet to prevent and blockade, prevent the grains from leaving, and also to blockade the ports. They will just say the Russians do that. But that is the situation now here in the south. So this is the overall situation here. Otherwise, all the other fronts are all very stagnant nowadays. There's nothing much to talk about them. My projection to what's coming next is that the Russians will actually easily capture the entire of Donbass within the next 1 month, 2 months. I made some very public prediction that they will capture the entire of the Donbass by the end of July. So I have only left with 28 days, 29 days. But in the long term, what I think the Russians will do is that okay, so my opinion about the Russians is that they don't have a very concrete. They must have not say that they don't have a concrete objective what they want now, other than the everything that is stated, the denazification, the demilitarization. All this they will continue to do to liberate Donbass. This is definitely the priority. But the key point is what is outside of Donbass. We already know that they're going to keep Zaporizhia, at least this part. They're going to keep Kherson. We are not sure if they're going to keep this part of Kharkiv. There's a likelihood they will, because they need the railway lines down to Donbass. So my own prediction is that they would actually depend on how the negotiation goes. The longer the Ukrainians do not surrender, then the Russians' additional plans to capture more land will start to grow. For example, if the Ukrainians continue to not want to negotiate, then or to give up the ownership of Crimea and Donbass, and even Kherson and Zaporizhia, then the Russians will actually, after conquering this part, they may start to take the rest of Kharkiv and probably Dnipro. Then if they still do not want to negotiate or give in to the Russians, then they will probably start to take Mykolaiv and Odessa. This is what I think will happen. And in the worst case scenario, what I think is that the Russians will actually annex Kharkiv, Dnipro, the whole of Zaporizhia, and Mykolaiv and Odessa, and perhaps also Dnipro as well. I said Dnipro. They might capture Dnipro. They might also capture this area of Kropyvnytsky, so that they will reduce the border of the Ukrainians with the Russians, and and then they might actually take Sumy, Chernihiv, and Poltava, and in fact half of Kiev as well. The reason is they might, okay, in the worst case scenario, I think the Russians will actually wants to use this river as the border, and then they will minimize the land border to them, and then these areas will not be annexed as Russian territory. It's likely that they might use this as some self-proclaimed republic, like what like independent country on their own, but under Russian interest, Russian influence. So and then similarly, you have People's Republic of Chernihiv and People's Republic of Poltava. Then they will probably absorb Sumy. It might be the kind of situation because I don't think the Russians want to I don't think the Russians want to have a mutual border with Ukraine anymore. This is my opinion. So, but I might be wrong. This is a very extreme situation because that will make Ukraine only this size, and with only this part of land, Ukraine will never be able to repay their debts. They are now accumulating at some ridiculous pace. But these are very speculative. These just some fun things to speculate about. Otherwise, in terms of the better situation, yeah, the Ukrainians have launched a multiple offensive. All of them has failed. All of them. They like, for example, the very famous Davidic Breed Front. They captured 3 villages and then they got pushed back. And then the Russians actually captured more land. They tried to attack Snihurivka, and then they lost Novopetrivka, Kalinivka, and Bohanivka. Every offense seems to have some bad consequence for the Ukrainians. So, but of course, this sounds very pro-Russian. So, anyway, this is just my very very quick coverage. I don't have any more to add. Prefer to do Q&A. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks DPA. It was great as usual. I mainly totally agree with your analysis, but I will make some provocation at the end. Now I'm collecting still the question from the stream, where there's a lot of questions. We will do like a question and answer at the end. I will pass the stand to Eric and the thanks. That is our new young speakers. Is only 18, so it's like our let's say youngest member in this panel. So Eric, if you want to take the stand.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Also, do you need to share the screen?
No, not really.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so
I will just like introduce myself. So I'm Eric. I'm the owner of the Instagram account Eric and Tongues. I'm focused on giving the information on military aspects of the war, and basically I was focused before the war on military vehicle and mostly tanks. And I think that's all. So I can give you the French point of view. So in France, not a lot of medias speaks about the military aspect. That's why I'm doing it. Mostly they are talking about the great attacks, like for example in Kremenchuk on the 28th of June, if I remember, the mall that was bombed. This kind of events are reported in the medias, yes, but the more precise aspects of the war are not reported. So, as a French student, yeah, as a French student, I can tell you that in geopolitics, we French are mainly supporting Ukraine for military equipment. I don't know if I'm clear. And yeah, I think that's kind of all for me. If anyone has anything
Okay, Eric. Let's say at the end, if you want, like to ask or to speak, answer to any question and answer.
Yeah, I
It's
prefer answering questions.
it's not a problem. Maybe we have like some question about military equipment, so we will
Sure.
give it to you. I wanted only to let's say to ending with some provocation when I collected a lot of let's say question. There's a lot of question on the panel, so let's see what we can do, because we are trying to take as more time as possible to the question panel. What I wanted to share with you. Okay, I wanted to share with you only few slides to close like the speak part. This time it's much more let's say soft and with something that I wanted to share with you to have some question about it with a different point of view. Let me do it. So, final provocation of the stream, and then we will pass to question and answer time. It's very interesting that the analysis from the two parts of propaganda, because both are propaganda, and I repeat to you, I'm not biased, as someone said in the comments. I am half and half, because I'm halfly European and I have like one part that is Russian. I know very good the Russian word, because I had also like an exodus Moldova. I stayed there like for 5 years many times. I lived in Russia, whatever. I have a lot of Russian friends, also US, all over the world. So my point of view, it's not pretty European point of view. It's a little bit worldwide oriented. What I wanted to share with you, some concept. First, there is a huge difference between the value of life that you have in Russia and in the Western world. So it's something that European people, and also sometimes South American, Asian, whatever, don't understand. Look at this graph about the death in the Second World War. We can see that the two states with the biggest amount of death were China and Soviet Union. But if you look about Soviet Union, the interesting calculation is that the military casualties were over 10 millions. So look at the US, for example. The number of the US, it's about 500,000. The number of Italy, it's about 500,000. Germany, it's, let's say, over 4 million, because they didn't defect during the retreat from Russia. So this is something that we have to understand. The value of life, it's very low still now in Russian Federation. So it's something that it's different from the Western point of view of a war. If the US want to do a war, they make the analysis of the cost of life for the internal politics. Because if you lose a lot of men, you will have a lot of problem of internal politics. In Russia, it's the opposite. The polls about Putin, it's very high. Also, there is a huge amount of death. But I give you one provocation. Can you give me any type of official transmission TV program in Russia where they are telling the real amount of death on field? Try to find it, because you will not find it. So it's for sure the information from both sides are propaganda, but you will not find the real amount of death. Plus, there is no conscription in the western part of Russia. So the richest part of Russia, that is before the Urals, have a little bit of conscription on field. The mostly of the people that is making the war now, it's from Eastern Russia, Tuvani Mongols or whatever. And this thing is very important. So to know the real value of life in Russian Federation. Ukraine, it's a state that it's problematic because it's a sum of previous states. Military summary that unfortunately is not connected now, but it will be the next one. In one of the first stream that he made at the beginning, explained the main difference that we have a state that it's a sum of different technical group. Lvov, Leopoli, it's a city that it's not Ukrainian, it's Polish. The western part, it was previous part of Grand Ducate of Latvia and Poland. So it's with a western point of view. The southern and the eastern part, it was every time with a Russian mentality. So it's very complicated. Let's go to the point. This thing, it's another provocation that I will give to you. It's about the percentage of ethnic Russian in the former Soviet Union. If you see, and we will go to a question because there is one question about Kazakhstan. There is a big amount of Russian. You have about 20 millions of Russia that found themselves outside Russian Federation on 26th of December of 1991. So Putin itself said that for him, geopolitically speaking, the collapse of Soviet Union was the worst thing that happened in the last 100 years, in his point of view. So this thing can generate a lot of problems and opportunities. So if you look from the Russian point of view, geopolitically, you can have some, let's say, places that you can use to exploit and have some troops on field. We will go. There was a question about Kobazna and Transnistria. Yes, there is a big depot of weapons, but these weapons were from 1990. It's from the Soviet era, so it's a lot of stuff, but very old. And actually in Transnistria, there is minimum 1,500 Russian peacekeeper. So Russia has already troops in Transnistria, but it's too small to operate and to make like a strategy that could be used for Odessa. If you look, you have this frozen conflict, Donetsk and Lugansk, Crimea, Transnistria, but you have also Abkhazia, South Ossetia, and Nagorno-Karabakh. With this thing, if you look at this position, Russia, with peacekeeping in this frozen conflict, has still a military control without wars. Donetsk and Lugansk and Crimea were different, but with the others, you can see that it's like as New Wordcon Jan said about the problem in Caucasus. You see that Russia has a lot of good position there. Take a look also in another pipe that is interesting, that is about the TAP, that is like the Baku-Seyhan and then Greece, Albany and Italy. It's another alternative pipe that going from Baku to Italy about oil and gas. And it was the alternative of a South Stream pipe. And it's passing nearly to South Ossetia. During the conflict of 2008, there is an amazing book that I suggest you to read, that it's called The Oil and the Glory of Steve Levine. Russian bombed this pipe, but they bombed only on near the pipe. So there was an international analyst that said, oh, look how dumb are the Russian army that missed the pipe. And the local Georgian guys say, no, they didn't miss the pipe. They show that they miss because to show us that they know where the pipe is. And the next time that we will piss them off, they will blow it. So it's very complicated, the situation. Last point, and then we will move to the question. When I was talking about the difference between Moscow and Peter and the rest of Russia, it was not a lack of respect about the rest of Russia. I mean that Russian people are people amazing. I like them a lot. They're very fun. They're very open. They're more next to European than American to European. This is what I'm saying. But Peter and Moscow are metropolitan area that are more, let's say, multicultural, next to Tokyo, New York, or whatever. The rest of Russia, it's completely different in habits, needs, everything. So if we take out all the Western supplies from the Russian world, the regular Russian people needs only pilmeni, piva, and a Russian car. They don't need a BMW or whatever. The Western people need wine, let's say good restaurant and Tesla. It's different type of needs. So with these different type of needs, we cannot have a situation where a war it will be so long, because all the Western countries are supporting Ukraine, but it's a way to degrade our economy. The inflation is skyrocketing. Last provocation, I suggest you to see this video on YouTube. It's called Alexander Dugin speaking on Ukraine conflict. This is the quote. So about multipolarity, who don't knows Alexander Dugin? It's like the main let's say philosopher that it's really appreciated by like the Siloviki, that it's like the group around Putin and whatever. What he said in this video, Dugin. He talked about the two languages. It's talking about this Earthland and Sealand theory of Mackinder, that was like the first, let's say, analyzer of geopolitics. And if you see that the two division, it's like land power, it's more about tradition, and sea power, it's like more about the let's say postmodern and technology. So the identification of land power, it's Russia. Sea power, it's not US, but it's UK-US. It's like Anglo-American world, and it's not with Europe. So you see that the conflict between West and Russia is not about ideology, not about race, and not about religion. Dugin emphasizes the geopolitical view, and the most important part is like the quote, the chessboard by Brzezinski. I will arrive on it. So what the great chessboard says. Finish the last slide. Without Ukraine, you see, as already noted, as an imperial restoration based on the community of independent states or Eurasianism was not a viable option. An empire without Ukraine, it will ultimately mean a Russia. It will become more Asian, are further away from Europe. So it's the geopolitical view that it's in Russia, it's this one. So without Ukraine, Russia is a regional power. With Ukraine, and with the demonstration that they can return back Ukraine, because a lot of Russian thinks that Ukraine is a Russian thing, it's not a real state. With Ukraine, they can prove that it's still a world power. This is a provocation of something that it's not a lot of mainstream. So let's pass to the questions. Okay. Let me go to the first. So first question, it's let me show it. Okay. So who wants to answer can answer. Do you think Russia will stop when they have Donbass, or they keep going for the entire Russian-speaking south and eastern part?
You want to go first?
Go.
Okay. No, I think
yeah,
I don't think they stop. I think they keep going for sure. Yeah, that's what I think. I don't know how to describe it.
So, like I explained just now, whether they will stop will depend on how Zelensky, or maybe the West, I'm not sure who is exactly in control of Ukraine now, when they decide to negotiate and give Russia what they want. So Russia make it very clear they want Donbass, they want recognition of Crimea, and definitely they're gonna want recognition of Kherson and Zaporizhia. I believe Kherson and Zaporizhia is some sort of like a punishment for not surrendering right at the beginning of the conflict. So if you remember at the beginning of the conflict, on the first day, I think first or second day of war, Putin is already calling Zelensky for negotiation to talk terms. So that's why there was this massive rush for Kiev to put pressure on the leadership. But of course, this pressure didn't seem to work out. It looks like the Ukrainians was very determined to fight, and as a result, Zaporizhia and Kherson seems to be that punishment for not negotiating right at the beginning. So because they would not have a justification to capture Zaporizhia and Kherson in the beginning, even though they might have the plan to do it, but because if the Ukraine immediately within the first week decided, okay, Donbass is yours, Crimea will recognize it, then Russia will have totally no justification to capture Kherson and Zaporizhia. It will totally be an act of aggression. It's like, to the Russians, this is still not an act of aggression. But if the Ukrainians already give them what they want and they want more, then Russia will lose all moral grounding, even within Russia. So, but now that the war continues to drag on, Zaporizhia and Kherson is gone. So if the Ukrainian leadership continues to do what they're doing now, then I believe the ambition of the Russians will start to go further and further. Yeah, that's my answer.
I agree with that. I would just like to add real quick onto the end where I think that it's going to stop. I think bare minimum, the idea of a Ukraine that exists to the east of the Dnieper River is probably not going to be in the future. I think if anything east of the Dnieper is ultimately going to end up in Russian hands. And I think Odessa is probably going to end up in Russian hands too. There's been a lot of statements from Russian officials that at this point they expect surrender. I don't think any of the original things on the table are going to be on the table if negotiations restart. But I think they expect surrender, and I think they expect to transfer they specifically have said all Russian cities back under Russian control. And what those cities are, it can be widely defined. I mean, they could decide to define Kyiv as a Russian city. I think places like Cherkasy and Dnipro are certainly, and especially Kharkov, are certainly what they would describe as Russian cities. So that's all I have to add to that.
Yeah, which is why just now when during my presentation, I see the worst case scenario where they push all the way up to the from the south all the way up, and then to close up the border area as short as possible, and then they take the entire eastern side of the Dnieper River. That is my worst case scenario, because I don't think they will be able to hold the western side. The population will not be happy with it. Then they will become a Vietnam situation for them. So I think, or Afghanistan situation for them. So they will hold whatever they can hold.
Okay, so Eric, if you want to say something, say it. Next question. Because we have a lot, so I already prepared, but just to move, and then if anybody want to answer, we can answer. Question for all: what is the actual Russia's plan when a propaganda but not very objective? So we already a little bit answer about this question, and the main point is that everybody, I mean, all the analysts are like agreeing in this point. Like that the main deal of Russia, I already showed this map at the beginning, was the initial plan was eastern part, southern, till the connection to Transnistria. So this is the real thing. The only thing that we need to understand is that if at the beginning the real attempt to take Kiev was real or a distraction. This is the only problem that you will get from the Russian propaganda. But I'm not talking propaganda in a bad way. Western propaganda also. So when I talk about propaganda, it's like what the TV are telling to the people. The Russian way of communication is we move to Kiev only to distract the army from Donbass. So they will not. Also, if there is a there was a temptation to take Kiev and they failed, they will not say it. So, but the main goal from the beginning was the south and the east, and I completely agreed with everybody that everything depends about when Zelensky and uh, also you both you said the same. Probably the negotiation is not by Zelensky. When the US will say that it's the right time to start the negotiation, because Zelensky is completely dependent by the West now. Let's move to the next one. Okay. Okay, perfect. Felipe Pires, have you taken a look at the NATO equipment being handed to Ukraine and if they made any difference? Eric, if you want to say something because it's your field.
So yeah, I can say something about that. So as I answered in the chat, the Caesar cannons are given are old ones. The new ones, so French army is actually modernizing its army. So we give old ones, and the gun itself isn't effective if there are no ammunitions. So the ammunitions given are basically standard rounds, like HE shells, which is high explosives, um, or other standard rounds, which can fire at like approximately 20 kilometers, which is ridiculous if you see what the modern shells can do. Like they are far more precise, and of course the pra- they have double fire range. Like they can shoot at 40 kilometers. So the equipment that are given by the NATO are old ones, and I don't know if they can be effective, but in good hands, yeah, maybe. All depends on the crew or the people.
So from my perspective, the NATO equipments from a strategic side, because I only cover the strategic, the big picture. It doesn't feels like it made an impact. It definitely there is impact. Definitely, they resupply the needed artillery the Ukrainians need to to take on the Russian artillery. Definitely, these NATO weapons have already killed a good number of Russians. Uh, However, in the big picture, in the strategic sense, it is not enough to turn the tide, to put it that way. Uh, Definitely, it does give additional consideration for the Russians, especially the new multiple launch rocket system, because I think the Russian the American MLRS is very accurate, as shown that they have actually hit a command post already. So, and that will actually give the Russians a lot more consideration, into the real security in terms of surface to air missiles that they need to deploy and all these things that to protect themselves. In terms of artillery, M777, Caesar, I don't think it makes much difference because it's not like the Soviet artilleries or the Russian artilleries are weak. Even the Soviet era artilleries are incredible artilleries as well. Whether it's accurate or not, that depends on how you look at it. Um, but that is only mainly to resupply what they have lost. So otherwise, but I don't think it makes a difference that can turn the tide, unfortunately.
Yana, you have a mic off, Yana.
Sorry, I agree with a lot of what's been said already. I think some points to make. Definitely, I mean, in effect, the Ukrainian government has essentially stated indirectly that the weapons that the West is sending is not enough. Like we know what the U.S. and Europe is sending, right? 18 multiple launch rocket systems, somewhere between 100 and 140 howitzers. You have all these different things, right? But Ukraine has come out and said we need 500 tanks, 500 artillery mounts, and 500 MLRS. So you have the actual amount that's been sent and what Ukraine has stated they need to win. They obviously don't match up. It's obviously not enough. They've ultimately admitted that. I think honestly, part of the reason why the equipment's even being sent to begin with. At the beginning of the war, it was stated that heavy weapons wouldn't be provided at all, that the focus would be on Stingers and Javelins. The only reason why it's been sent to begin with is basically the media campaign that Ukraine is running. They're very kind of like integrated into Western news and media right now. If you look at like a lot of media networks, like there's a lot of Ukrainian news stations that are mingling right in with Google News, Apple News, Ground News, like wherever your hub is. A lot of these Ukrainian media in there, it's all state-run media, and it's all them begging for weapons. So there's a significant amount of political pressure on the Americans, the Germans, the Brits to supply these heavy weapons. And what you're seeing is an attempt at them to satisfy their internal political pressure without basically pissing off Russia, or without exhausting their own supplies in the rare circumstance that they have to end up fighting Russia. So um, and to Eric's point, and hopefully Eric, I'm not sure if you have the answer to this, but I was trying to find it. I'm kind of looking for uh, an answer on like how many Caesar self-propelled guns the French army has. But before you answer that, to talk about like the effectiveness of NATO versus Russian artillery. Russian artillery or Russian equipment is designed to be cheap, mass produced, reliable, and ultimately disposable. Like even when you look at like MiG 29s and Sukhoi 29s and 35s, $35 million a pop, maybe. F-35 fifth gen fighters in America cost $135 million a pop. F-22 Raptors cost $300 million a pop. These weapons, they're just designed for completely different purposes, and the Russian weapons are ultimately designed for the type of war that's being fought right now. So that's all I have to say about that, Eric. Hopefully you can answer the question on the French Caesar guns.
Can I add something too? So, as I said, the Caesar are sent, but the crew are not trained. Like Ukrainians don't know how to use it, and it's the same for the PZH 200,000. They need formation to use it, and basically, a French soldier will took like 4 or 3 months to learn to use it. So it's time that Ukrainians have not. It means that they will be far less more not effective.
Got it. So let's try. Okay. Ooh. I can post directly the comment from YouTube. So amazing stream. So question that is like specifically for Ian, I think. What do you think will be the effect of the current demographic collapse in the developed world, including former Soviet Union and China, on future geopolitics alliance? Will you see realignments?
Yeah, the thing, this is where it starts to be really hard to predict. One of the things, one of the positives, I guess you can say, for countries like Germany, Poland, Ukraine, Russia, China, like moving across the entirety of Asia, they're all or Europe and Asia, they're all experiencing the same problem. So there's very few countries in the area that are on the rise. So they're all kind of like it's like a fight over who dies first kind of thing. And which I'd argue the Russians are like on the good path of like acting first. So I mean, that's probably the desire of Russia is to get ahead of things, right? So as far as like the effect of demographic collapse, I mean, you're going to see like internal political problems, very bad internal political problems. You're going to see very bad budgetary issues in a lot of these countries, especially in Europe, because they are what's the best way to describe them? They have large social safety nets in these countries. There's big social programs, heavy spending. Ultimately, can't those programs cannot be funded from tax revenue coming from a working class that's half the size of the class that's absorbing those programs. So very difficult for European countries. You're probably going to see collapse of like healthcare and stuff in some places around Europe. Like I said, this is like very hard to predict. They're gonna have to pick and choose what they spend money on, though. But ultimately, like political instability in all those countries is a big one. And I mean, I could probably spend like 2 hours talking about these problems with China. I mean, but I'm not gonna do that. Like China, I'll just say it's probably like the biggest mess of a country on the planet right now in terms of like what they have coming for them. I mean, it's not good. I mean, maybe we can make a whole another panel on just talking about China.
We will, Jan.
Yeah,
But
okay.
if I can add something to what you said, imagine that the problem that I in my point of view is that Chinese and the Asian, let's say, vision of the world, it's long term. This is the problem of Europe. Europe, it's not long term, except Scandinavian. Scandinavian are thinking a society in terms of not decades, but 50 years. So they will not change politics if the government will change. In Italy or Germany or Spain or whatever, France, it's the same. The policy of the government changes very frequently, at least every 5 years. Something that I can tell to you about Italy. I'm from Lake Garda, a very touristical place. When we will switch to the next question, we have a huge problem now about work and manpower and labor. Why? Because for a policy, as you said, about healthcare, and this is about unemployment, safety grid, we call it like citizenship salary. Now in Italy, if you don't work, you get 780 euros. So if you receive one job of 1,200, you will not accept it. You stay on the couch and don't work. So the problem about demography, it's very interesting because 50 years ago in Italy, you had 5 people working, 1 in pension. Now it's 3 people working, 1 in pension. In the next decade, we will have 2 in working and 1 in pension. And this problem, and I repeat, I'm not offensive in it, the life expectancy in Russia, especially for men, it's less than 70 years. So this is what I'm talking about, the value of life. It's because you can see in COVID, in Russia, nobody cared about COVID because people is dying for other things. They don't care about COVID. So it's the heart attack, alcoholism. You can check whatever you want. It's a different approach of life. I'm not telling bad about Russians. So we cannot adapt our way of thinking to them because it's different. So let's move to the next question. So I put a banner. Okay. Okay, it's about DPA. Can you also cover think about Ukraine Russia capacity to keep fighting in light of losses of men and material?
Oh, I'll just do a quick one. I always tell people Russian military is designed to confront NATO as a whole. Even though they may not win the conventional war, but because when they fight NATO, they will use the nuclear weapons. So then they will have this kind of some sort of parity. So if you are going to fight NATO, then you have a stupid amount of troops, and your army will be huge. So Ukraine is just one country. So to the Russian, which is why they only call it a special military operation, it's like a police force sending a squad, a SWAT team out. It's that kind of mentality. It's just that this SWAT team is like 200,000 strong. So which is why the Russians will be able to keep this up, and they're doing rotations. So I'm not sure about what kind of rotation they are doing. Are they sending from every single military district so that everyone have a combat experience? Because if they are doing that, that will be very scary, because they will raise the entire quality and level of the Russian military by like sky high. We have to remember none of the Western powers or Western militaries had fought in a proper war for like forever. Even the Americans, the last proper war is, I'm not even sure Iraq war is a proper war. Maybe Vietnam War. So it's been a long time. So they have not fought with a peer level military, and now Russians have this experience. And as we can see, the Ukrainians are suffering because they are even though they are trained by the NATO forces, it's inadequate to deal with the Russian World War II Soviet era doctrine. The Russians, from my understanding, the Russians started off with what they learned from the Syrian war, and then they start to realize it's not working in the peer-to-peer conflict. Then they start to dig out all their old doctrines, old training manuals, and then they start to adapt that strategy. And they now fighting a lot more like what we will see in World War II, where you see this encirclement, this large pincer movement, and flanking, around cities. This is what we are seeing now, which is very reminiscent of what we saw during World War II. So, not sure how. So I'm sure every single military now is actually watching. Like for me, I lost a lot of confidence in my own military after seeing that trench warfare actually still works today. Then I was thinking, we don't have TOS-1 flamethrowers. So how do we going to clear all these entrenchment if my enemy is going to have a lot of trenches? So I don't think my Singapore military will have an answer to that. So I think the Western military will also have a problem, because I don't think the Western military also have a flamethrower type of artillery. So yeah, but in terms of Ukraine side, they are already, from my own very unprofessional estimates, I think the Ukrainians have already lost 80% of their regular forces. That means the trained troops, the regular soldiers that they have before the war, I think 80% of them is either dead or badly injured, that they are already out of action. So leaving the 20% leading all these mobilized conscripts and totally undertrained. I read an anecdote that they only trained for 2 weeks, firing only 24 rounds. I fired more rounds in my first live firing session in my conscription days. And after 3 months of training, I still think that I'm stupid. So I'm not sure how 2 weeks is able to do anything for them. Yeah, like 3 months of training, I feel that if there's a war, I go out, I will die. 2 weeks is just suicide. So this is a situation I think Ukraine is facing. They don't really have the kind of quality of the soldiers, and we are seeing this effect as the front collapse faster. All the towns and villages, the entrenched positions, they are actually giving up much faster than we are seeing over the past 3 months. So yeah, that's my answer. I thought it was supposed to be brief. That went a bit long.
Okay, it was perfect. So let's move. Which one? It's more technical. Also, everybody can take the stand when you want. This is more about Kazakhstan. It's interesting. And are recent attempts of distancing from Russia genuine, or prearranged with Russia so the Kazakhstan can be backdoor for Russia to avoid sanction? Okay, I can be super briefly. You have to look that actually there is like this called gray law in Russia, and I don't know if anybody knows about it, but it's very easy to import stuff from former Russian Republic to Russia. So my opinion is yes. Let's say Kazakhstan cannot be distanced for real from Russia, as I show in my previously slide. 25% of the population is Russian in Kazakhstan, ethnically Russian, speaking Russia, and it's mainly completed in the northern border. So if Kazakhstan will do anything that it's bad for Russia, it's like Donetsk too. So I don't think that it's possible to have a real discharge before the problem that Belarus had when they stopped the Ryan plane with the Navalny team inside guy. Belarus was used to import stuff after the 2014 sanction to cheat the sanction, because a lot of people don't know about it, but Belarus and the Russian Federation are in a trade union from many years, and there is no border. So if you go to Belarus, technically you are able to go to Russia without any border control. So in this case, I think that the answer it's this one. It's not true. Okay. Let's move if someone want to intervene, Yana or whatever, because we have a lot.
Okay.
Okay, no, this one, it was the previous one.
Yeah, that's the previous one.
Okay.
No idea. All the numbers are fake.
I would say the estimates are certainly higher. I'm not going to put an actual number out there, but I'm going to say that they're certainly higher than probably any of the rumors you've heard. And I would imagine that at this point in the war, it hasn't always been this way, but at this point, July 1st, your casualties for the Ukrainian side are probably much, much higher. But Russian are likely high as well.
My thoughts is people will just say that I'm pro-Russian, so I'm not going to say the numbers of people dying.
Okay. No, but I think like nobody knows the real numbers, because
the numbers are
pumping. Ukraine are saying one number, it's less.
It's all going to be wrong or fake.
Yeah, it's impossible to know.
Yeah, the only reason why I base my estimate the way I do is Ukraine's own statements on the amount of artillery being flown back and forth. I mean, if you really think that the Ukrainian people are so superior that they can dodge more artillery shells than the Russians can, you know, at the disparities, I mean, it's just not like a valid way of thinking. Like they're getting hammered pretty much.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the casualties are, but it's probably ugly.
So for example, they publicly claim that they have lost 50% of all the heavy equipment. So I'm sure that is an understatement.
Yeah.
Then you could easily imagine that they have lost 50% of their frontline troops.
Yeah.
So 50% of frontline troops could be 50,000, could be 100,000. So, and then that is only on the heavy equipment side, or kind of like the lower estimate. You haven't talked about the people dying in the trenches. So it's going to be stupid amount of people dying, and I don't want to speculate on that.
Yeah.
Actually, I do speculate on that. I lied.
Yeah. Let's move. So about the British have threatened to attack Russia with British army. Do you think that British army will attack the Russian army? Guys, the war will end in Ukraine. Read the Article 5, please. It's impossible a war between NATO and Russia. If it will be, it will not be the next streaming. So,
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the British Army is entirely unlikely to make any kind of move without express permission from the U.S. I mean, it's at this point, it's basically a satellite state. I mean, not really like an economic satellite, but it is severed from the EU now and probably moving towards the US more economically. But as far as their military goes, I don't even think they can operate in a lot of these theaters around the world without stopping at US bases for their Navy to get fuel and supplies for their ships, or get support from US Air Force tankers around the world in order to operate their Air Force. I mean, they couldn't even get troops into Iraq and Afghanistan without our help. So the possibility of the British engaging against the Russians alone at this point, I mean, is just not is not intelligent, and they wouldn't do that. They just wouldn't.
Mhm.
It's not a
So
good move.
so if we are looking, if anyone is monitoring like the general numbers of how many troops are fighting, the British army, if they can teleport, they just like appear in Ukraine. They're merely able to fight on one front, just one front. The Ukrainians are fighting on multiple fronts because the Ukrainian military is stupidly huge. The British army is actually not that big, so they can only deal with one front, and we are talking about teleporting. So if they are going to like declare war and that kind of thing, I don't even think they are able to land on Ukraine directly. They will have to go through countries that the Russians do not dare to strike, and then all the beautiful new carriers will be sunk within the first 3 days by hypersonic weapons. So then they will be demoralized, and this is a pointless war. They can't win. So I don't think the British dares to do that. Like everyone is just depending on the United States. Like the Baltic states, everyone is just talking very big, showing their alpha maleness because they got the Americans standing behind them. So that's what I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think the British Army could even win in a head-to-head conflict against, like, say, Turkey. I really don't. They're significantly underpowered in the army. As far as the Navy goes, I mean, they certainly have a far more powerful Navy than most states in the world. It's probably the third most powerful Navy, um, and that's solely based on firepower coming from aircraft carriers. Is how I do that measurement. So. Um, they're they're not geared for the type of conflict going on in Russia, and frankly, the British Army has never fought in that territory and has no doctrinal or historic experience in that
Mhm.
they can even call upon or read in their archives. So
Yeah.
So let's move. We have still some questions
CIA.
about how has the CIA been so effective as pulling the wool over the eyes of everyone in the West? The light seems to only get through a small independent channel like this. Okay. Um,
I start first.
yeah, you
The
can take
the
a crack at
the,
that.
no,
the So I actually just
take
I
this
talked about
stand.
it like, yeah, I just talked about this actually on Twitter just like yesterday, to reply to someone. The reason it's not CIA actually. It's actually the whole of mainstream media and everything. The reason is because no one spends so much time like us reading the news and reading all the pieces of information. Everybody is just busy with life. They need to work, take care of kids, they need to sleep. Then they only have time like for half an hour just to watch the normal TV news or just read through the headlines on Facebook or on those news website. You just scroll through, see what's the headline, and maybe on Twitter a bit. No one have the time to actually spend time to dwell on one topic, go through 20 articles like from all the different sources and try to synthesize what actually it means. And that's what the independent channels like us is doing. Like for example, if I did not cover the war on a daily basis, I have no freaking idea what's happening. Actually, I would have believed anything. I will be one of those idiots that share, wow, the Ukrainians have captured back Snake Island, that which they haven't even landed on the island yet. So I will be one of those idiots because haven't really spent the time uh, to understand what's happening. So yeah, it's not about CIA being effective. It's just about humans being ineffective.
Yeah, I agree, and I agree entirely. I've actually said almost the exact same thing on my channel. The only thing I would add to it is, what drives the media, and a lot of people think that mainstream media is very like intentional and purposeful in the way it like misrepresents things. And I just want to say, I don't. You're claiming they're way smarter than they are. It's driven by ad revenue, and they're gonna tell what sells. And if people in America want to hear that Ukraine is winning the war, they're gonna sell stories all day long that Ukraine is winning the war. And that's just a fact of it. Now, at a certain point, um, you know, you know obvious lies don't really sell. So when it becomes more and more apparent to the American public that the war is not going as well as they believe, then the media reacts to that and slowly starts to shift its position, which I believe you're starting to see now. But yeah, I would just add that I don't think it's malicious. I think it's just they're trying to make money off ad revenue, and they're telling the story. And like what Wyatt said, it's a matter of most people don't have all day to read about this. So as far as the CIA goes, obviously, I don't think that the involvement in domestic stuffs is too great. The only area that I can imagine they have involvement in is in a similar fashion that the Russian uh, Internet Research Agency. If you guys have heard anything about this, is basically like troll farms, things like that. They definitely exist. The effect of them, is questionable. Other than, I mean, they produce some pretty good memes sometimes, but I think the CIA is probably engaged in social media networks in the same fashion. How to spot it or whether to know if the troll that's in your comments is CIA or KGB. I don't think there's any way to really know. So, I mean, I don't really. I guess that's all I have to say about that. I'm not sure of the involvement, but I imagine it's somewhere to that degree.
As a if I can conclude this answering, like I'm telling you only about Italy. Let's say this the main. Finally, let's say this. I tried like making. I have like a political channel in Italy with a lot of people. It's like a little bit fun and game for me because there is a lot of people in my experience from many parties, from the government, whatever. I know a lot of people, and I put all together in one chat. But mostly of them don't have the numbers of the others, so they don't know each other. So you don't know who is speaking. It's very interesting for me. But I know everybody, and I'm trying to translating mostly of the news filtered from Russian and Ukrainian channel to try to make a little bit better information for the Italian policymaker. But what I can say to you is that I don't think that a lot of policymakers are interested in how the war is going on field, because there is a political agenda about this. It's not a question of Ukraine. The sad things for me, finally, it's there is a lot of people, especially young people, that is dying for nothing. Both sides, Ukrainian and Russian. I have a lot of friends in Russia and also Ukraine, but imagine that people now in Russia are called to army. For example, people from FSB, and not in age for fighting, only because they don't have child. So it's very bad because it's a situation when if you go on in field at the moment, independent what side, you have a good chance to die now. So it's not so good. So we have some other question before closing, but one was interesting about okay, Belarusian army, but it's okay. This one, returning back. If someone want to answer about, it's about the try to attempt to annex Moldova if the Russian army will able to arrive to Odessa.
I'll take a crack at it. I think in the more immediate sense, I think that like Western media, especially like the current Biden administration, sees it as a big possibility, and they speak of it like it's going to happen more immediately once, probably even before the war with Ukraine is over. And I would say I disagree with that assessment. I think that after the war in Ukraine is over, the Russians, depending on what deal they get and how close they are to Moldova, obviously if they don't capture the territory of Odessa, then this question is just like right out of the realm of possibility. But if they capture the territory of Odessa, they would probably wait for a cool down period. There's been some obvious statements that Putin is very aware of how short the attention span of Western public is. They would likely wait if this was their goal, and if they did want to capture Moldova, they would probably wait a year or two, and then a very very low effort would be put into doing it in comparison to Ukraine. Moldova is in nowhere near the position to defend themselves that even Ukraine is in. So, is it in the realm of like things that Russia would like to accomplish, best case scenario, absolutely. You know, is it gonna, if they're gonna drive into Odessa and then, you know, a week later turn straight up to Chisinau, or I'm not sure how to pronounce the capital, but
Chisinau.
yeah, Chisinau. I doubt it. Very, very much doubt it. I think, yeah, I think it'll be, if it does happen, it'll be a few years from now.
I don't think so. I personally don't think they will annex Moldova unless there is some major geopolitical changes that maybe, like for example, NATO breakup, the NATO breakdown. For example, because maybe of all this, food and fuel crisis, anything, then they start quarreling, and Germany say, "Fuck it, I'm leaving." Then, or UK overdid their anti-EU stance, and then then they have a total fallout, or maybe all some reasons. Then, in the right geopolitical situation, then Russia may tempt Moldova into a reunion with Transnistria, maybe. But I don't think they will invade, because annexing Moldova,
you have a little bit like metallical voice in the stream. If you can try to like switch off and on mic.
Yeah, your mic's not working. While he's fixing that, I will say that I think a political takeover of Moldova is far more likely. I think that Russia can put quite a bit of pressure on Moldova, like, and the people there are very well aware of the fact that they can't defend themselves, so they can probably pressure Moldova into coming into the Russian side, and they're not a member of NATO, so NATO's reaction to an invasion of Moldova would likely be exactly the same as it is to the reaction of the invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, and I confirm what you said, but imagine like this. I went in Moldova like for 5 years, so I know very well like the place. You don't need to invade Moldova, because the main thing, it's much simpler. If you look to the geopolitical situation and internal political situation of Moldova, the previous president, that was Dodon, was completely pro-Russian, of like socialist communist party. So and imagine that the average salary in Moldova is about $120 for month. So you don't need to invade. You need only to cut gas, like now we are doing. They are already doing. We are like skyrocketing the price of gas in Moldova. It's completely dependent from Russia. And the main thing is that you can easily move the next election, because Maya Sandu, that is the actual president, is like completely pro West, pro NATO, pro blah blah blah. But the problem is that the majority of the vote of Moldova, it's from the young people that are abroad, not resident in Moldova. The people in Moldova, it's mainly old people with a Soviet mindset. This is so you don't like, and I think that probably also, if there is a chance that Odessa will remain, the scenario that I think that it could be acceptable for negotiation in Ukraine, not for Russia, but for Ukraine, it's to still have a part of the access to the sea, because without the access of the sea, Ukraine will not exist anymore, because you are not able to pass the grain out and blah blah blah. If Odessa will remain a port available for Ukraine, I mean, and Russia will have the completely access of Azov Sea, and with Crimea and defense, like after the Dnipro River, I think that it's much affordable to have like a puppet government in Moldova instead of invading it. And the defense is nothing in Moldova. The army, it's zero. If you check to the Prednistrovyan Moldovan War in 1992, there was the 6th Army on ground. The war ended in 10 days. So there is no defense. The army is still the Soviet. There is nothing that can defend the state. And the north and east, it's a strange place to see, because north and east, it's completely Russian speaking. Northern part and eastern part. And the southern part, it's a very strange place, but it's called Gagauzia, and they are Turkish speaking. It's Turkic ethnical people. So and Moldova, it's strange because it's small, but it's a mess of ethnicity. You have Ukrainians, you have Russian, you have Romanian, you have Gagausian. So and it's the poorest state of Europe. So I don't know. It's very interesting also to take care, because what we are not thinking about, it's also about the reconstruction. So also, if you get the Donbass it's completely destroyed. So it will be interesting, the alliance of Russia with the other power like China or whatever to help the reconstruction, because for sure Russia have not the money to reconstruct the Donbass at all. So Eric, if you want to say something, you are welcome. Okay.
So is my mic back? Is it better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
No,
better.
no, it's okay.
Oh, yeah. I just want to complete my point. So I don't think the Russians will annex Moldova because they want to preserve this image of they are not aggressive, they are not imperialistic. So capturing Moldova, even if it's militarily easy, even if NATO totally collapse, they will not want to easily make such a decision unless the geopolitical situation demands that they need to rescue Moldova, rescue whatever the kind of rescue will be. Then maybe Moldova may request that can you bring us back into the federation? Then that will be the annexation. I don't think in the current state of affair the Russians want Moldova. I think they actually do not want their border to go so close to NATO, since they wanted the NATO to go far, leave them alone. So going nearer to NATO just don't make sense to me.
Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with casus belli, honestly, like, which is in older terms not used a lot anymore, but if states just start invading other states without any rhyme or reason to do so, it doesn't matter what treaties or what alliances are in place, like everyone's going to get pretty mad and unite and join in a war. So you don't want like a coalition to form, like if you think about Napoleonic times where he didn't really ever find like a casus belli to start a war with anyone. He just well, in the beginning, they declared war on him, but after that it was he would just go and invade Spain, Austria, like some of these places. So you get this situation where these large coalitions are formed just for the sole purpose of your destruction. And geopolitically, it's not a good position to be in. And I'm sure Russia wants to avoid, NATO is an anti-Russian coalition, but they want to avoid the strengthening of that coalition, and they want to prevent some of their potential friends abroad from distancing themselves. Which I think an immediate invasion of Moldova would certainly turn off some of these countries like India, Indonesia, some of these places from giving any kind of support to Russia. So I think if it does happen, it'll be in time.
Okay, we have a last three question, and then we will close. So this one, it's like from the economic perspective, what do you guys think of an economic effect of the war, and how could Russia undermine the sanction with the help of other countries?
Who first?
You want me to go first? You want to go first? Okay. Well, from an economic perspective, I mean, honestly, I'm not trying to like parrot Russian points here, but I mean, a lot of the sanctions that are on Russia are obviously they hurt Russia. Like Russia needs computer chips. Russia needs high grade mechanical parts, machine. Like one of the biggest ones is machine tools, or just basically like machines like used in manufacturing of like things like that. Like Russia can't build up a competitive industry to the West without some of like the intermediate stuff that's used. I would say like robotics is probably like a big one. Computers and chips and stuff like that are big. High tech stuff in general is really big. So yes, it like sanctions hurt Russia, but in a way, Russia has read the situation a little bit better and a little bit more accurately than Western governments have. and that's the fact that Russia has all the raw resources it needs within the country for its own survival. And that cannot be said about European countries. You know, Germany does not have internal energy for its own needs. There's actually the only country in Europe that has even close to it is France, and that's because of nuclear power. You know, it's like what, like over 50% of the grid is nuclear, but still, like gasoline, you know, fuel prices are. I mean, I don't know for certain. Maybe Eric can speak to it, but are apparently on the rise, even in France. So, you know, this is like like if you imagine like production in a modern economy as like a pyramid, like your base materials, the base of the pyramid is the raw goods and resources, and the computer chips are on the top. Like you need all the raw stuff on the bottom to even make the computer chips. So while the West is trying to starve Russia of advanced components and advanced technologies, they themselves are going to have trouble developing and manufacturing these advanced technologies without resources that first come from Russia. Nickel, aluminum. And I was talking to Stefano about this yesterday. Nickel, aluminum, copper, cobalt, like a lot of these things that go into computer chips, that go into batteries, that go into almost all advanced technologies. A lot of it comes from Russia. I mean, it's what, 12% of the Earth's surface, and it's a damn good portion of the best mining materials and the best and most fertile lands for growing food. So, you know, I think the sanctions situation has been read wrong by the West, honestly. And I think the general idea was that Russia was weaker than it is, and that Russia would potentially not necessarily collapse, but collapse in its position and its internal support for the war before the West would. So it's like it's a race against time, and time is on the side of the Russians because the raw resources are on the side of the Russians. So you know, I don't even think really, I mean, Russia needs other countries' help. A lot of these countries don't have any choice, you know, like India, you know, is friendly with Russia, but they don't give a shit about Europe. I mean, if they see, you know, gas, like if everyone's paying $120 a barrel for oil, and Russia's like, we'll sell it to you guys for $70 a barrel. Russia's making $30 more a barrel than they were before coronavirus started off of that oil. That's almost 100% increase in the profit they're making off that barrel. And the Indians are paying basically half the amount that everyone else in the world is. So they have immediately an advantage in production and the cost. Like, so now India can compete more with some of their peer competitors in terms of economics because they have a lower price of energy. So like everything about that says that there's not a chance that India is going to you know, conform with the Western idea of what pressure should be put on Russia. You know, they're going to do what's best for them, and what's best for them is to pretend like the sanctions don't even exist, which I mean, in reality, they don't. Sanctions are really just self-imposed parameters on the West's own economy from interacting with Russia. They have absolutely no authority at stopping other sovereign nations from doing what they think is best for their own people. Now they can put pressure on those sovereign nations, like say if it, I don't know, like Indonesia might be a good one. That has a lot of manufacturing relationship with the U.S. I mean, the U.S. might be able to put some pressure on Indonesia to you know, be more aggressive towards Russia. But in the end, the relationship between the U.S. and Indonesia is it's not really that dynamic. Like the U.S. needs places for low skilled and cheap manufacturing, cheap labor to produce some of these goods that can't be produced in China anymore, which we can get into another day about, you know, the cost of labor in China. But ultimately, Russia, I think, holds more cards in this sanction situation than the U.S. does.
Yeah, I think that is also, you know, if you're anyone is following about the situation in the BRICS country, BRICS, BRICS is expanding, and they are also, you know, coming up with their own transaction, their own SWIFT system. They're gonna, you know, they also committed to, you know, transact trading through their own currency, national currencies, and then Argentina have signed up, Iran have signed up. I think Pakistan is interested, which is I think is interested. Given India is also inside, which is interesting, and it's going to become the next most important economic bloc. In fact, might become the most important economic bloc if accident happen. So I think, and this entire change is all because of this war. Without this war, I don't think BRICS will actually grow. And a lot of the most of the country in the world really needs Russia in terms of the fertilizer, the food, the gas, the fuel. It's hard to run away from Russia, and the rest of the world don't give a damn about Europe. So their own survival, just like the situation mentioned about Moldova, they're only earning $100, $120 per month. Situation is replicated across most of the world, most of Africa, a large part of Asia. They survival is more important. So if let's say the food crisis is gonna hit and the energy crisis is gonna hit all at the same time later this year, whoever come to save them will be their best friend forever. And who can save them? It's not going to be the Europeans. The Europeans don't produce the energy. They don't produce the food. It's going to be the Russians. So when the Russians come in, then they become BFF. They're going to have a permanent influence in all these countries because they are the knight in shining armor. And this will also affect the entire geopolitical situation, the balance, where suddenly everybody is going to be like pro-Russia. At the moment, it's not that much yet. Everybody's very afraid of the Western powers, the Western economic system. But if there is a viable alternative, and it's actually now happening in the BRICS, then I think, that is going to change the entire economy of the world in a very uncomfortable way for the Europeans and the Americans.
Okay. Let's move to the next question. But I want to make let's say also a European point of view. Okay. Because if you see I like a lot this panel more than the other one because it's more with different point of views. At the last time was like with two panels that were let's say Ukraine, Belarus, Singapore, and we missed US and Europe mainly. My point of view, it's let's say that if you look to a map of the world, the biggest difference it's about the states that have a healthcare system that is public. As Jan said at the beginning, if you look at the world, the only part with healthcare coverage is Europe. US have not, China have not, Russia have not, and whatever. So at the moment, the problem is if it's affordable to maintain this type of system with this economy. I have to correct Defense Politics Asia, Argentina is not yet agreed with BRICS. And because Argentina was also in the G7 team, now I think that everybody is waiting to know what will happen, because your BFF depends how the things will go. Also Brazil, it's in BRICS, but it's not aligned at the moment to Russia. So it's very complicated. Everything will depend who will win the election in Brazil. So it's to make prediction about geopolitics now, I think that it's like a very gambling. Nobody knows what will happen because the edge is too small. Because you can have also a coup in Russia. We don't know what will happen, because also the internal approval of Russia, it's not so clear. The population approval, it's one thing. The political approval, it's another thing, because you don't have a multi-party system in Russia. Really, there is no opposition. So the people, it's let's say, agreeing 80% to the policy of the United Russia, because there is no an alternative. So it's not agreeing because they are agreeing. It's because it's one or one. So nothing different. About the production in Europe, also about agricultural production. Europe, it's producing a lot of food. But the problem is that it's mainly for the European market. This is the main difference. So it's a little bit a complicated thing, but I think we will have time. So, okay, about BRICS, this thing, Argentina, Iraq, Iran, Argentina, Brazil, Russia, China, India, and also
Not Saudi Arabia.
will join. Saudi Arabia, I don't
Not Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely probably kind of like their current position in the world. It seems like everything about what Saudi Arabia does with foreign policy is to maintain status quo. But I mean, the minute that Saudi Arabia starts to deviate, and like you said, like it's very unsure the directions things are going. Saudi Arabia has a very loose control over their own country. And they're very paranoid. I mean, the army, the Saudi Arabian army, isn't even full of Saudi Arabians. It's full of Pakistanis because they don't trust, anyone inside their own country. That like the king is too afraid that someone is going to gain so much power and overthrow the government. So I think Saudi Arabia is going to prefer being in between, kind of doing their own thing. Holding basically. I mean, and I'm not saying that they're like neutral by any means. Like their basic goal in anything they do is to hold the world hostage with oil and get what they want as far as money goes. I mean, they've been holding the West hostage in terms of like oil and policy like that for a long time. It's now going to like kind of shift towards like Asia. Asia is like where most of the oil from Saudi Arabia, the end point is actually in China and Southeast Asia. So I mean, we'll see. But I don't think they're going to join BRICS though.
Last two things and we finish. So Rolf Steiner said about, okay, this is one thing that can make clear the situation. For sure, US didn't like the relationship between Germany and Russia. You have to know something that nobody is telling about this thing, and then I will ask like the opinion of the other speakers. Okay, you have to know that the Italian bureaucracy is a French bureaucracy. Okay, it's not Italian because the creator of the state was Count Cavour and he was not speaking Italian but French. The Russian bureaucracy, it's German, it's not Russian. Catherine the Great was German. The most part of the Tsar were German, not Russian. So it's this love. And before the Second World War, there was a chance to have before Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, there was a huge chance that there was an agreement between Russian Empire or Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. And in this case, for sure, we knew another war and another victory in the Second World War. Nord Stream 2, you have to know that was switched off casually just before the war. Why? Because at the end of the war it could be reactivated immediately. Trust me, Germans are not stupid. So this thing was they finished, and casually, if you look at the time lapse of the war, Nord Stream was finished just some weeks before the Russian intervention, and they switched off before. So they knew already that there was this geopolitical movement. So what I hope is that the negotiation will start as soon as possible, because nobody has advantage of this war. We have a lot of people dying, and we are like, let's say, make a kindergarten game. I make sanction to you, I don't give oil to you, I increase everybody is losing money and everything. Also, Russia is not in a good situation. But I tell you this thing. If you go to Russia and go to the supermarket and you are a woman and want to buy absorbents, stupid things, price is doubled. It's not plus 20%. So normal Russian people, it's also very affected about this thing. But the problem is that they are very proud and they're very nationalist, and in a good way. I'm not talking bad. And so they don't show that they are having problems and troubles about this situation, but they have. So Ifiana, Eric, and yet you want to say something about this thing in Germany, and then I will move to the last question, and we will close at the.
Yeah, I just completely agree with what Rolf is pointing out in that statement. Yeah, I mean, Russia and Germany both know very well that the war started after the completion of the pipeline, not before. And probably it was, that's probably by design. So, at any point, if Germany gives in to Russian demands, this is going to be the first sign of it. They're probably not likely going to say. I mean, Olaf Scholz is not going to come out and say we've capitulated to the government's, the Russians' demands. We're going to go with them. That's political suicide. What they're going to try to sell it as is they're going to say, we support Ukraine, but we can't sacrifice our own industry and economic well-being, or else that we can't give any support to Ukraine, or that's going to hurt us more or whatever. So we've made an agreement to increase gas flows from Russia, and then there will probably be a couple days time period before the news picks up and they're like, oh, Nord Stream 2 is actually operating now. It's probably going to be something like that. It's not going to be so straightforward of a thing, but I think a German capitulation to Russian energy demands will be in the form of gas flowing through Nord Stream 2. I agree with that. I think that's going to be the case. If it
or they
happens.
can make it sound okay. They can make it sound like the Russian lose to us in negotiations, so they actually open the Nord Stream 2 for us.
Yeah. I mean, that's surely how the European Union will will like state the way it is, but yeah. It'll be in some form of that. I do think that gas will flow through that Nord Stream 2 pipeline someday. I don't think that it's gonna rust into oblivion. That's certain.
Okay. So, I was wrong. That was the last two. So then when we finish, but this one is faster. So about the chance that could be a coup in Ukraine to change the government, or about the morale and whatever. If you have any opinion about it.
I like this question, and I haven't addressed this in my channel, but I've been aware of like some rumors of this. I think it is actually possible, and history would say that it's possible. This tends to happen in countries that are losing wars. If there's any kind of like disagreement within the inner workings of the government on how the war is being fought, I don't think that the angle which they're suggesting this coup would come by saying that the coup would come from an angle of huge losses and resistance to mobilization and things like that. The people that are resistant to mobilization don't have any place within the Ukrainian government. So like what this question is suggesting is more like a popular revolt against the war in general, which would come from pro-Russian or Russian-speaking or just neutral populations in terms of like, what do you like better, Ukrainian or Russian population? A lot of people in Ukraine are probably just like, I want to live, man, and like I want to work. Most people don't want to go in and die in a war, right? So I don't see any kind of coup coming from that sector because it has no power within the Ukrainian government. I think that if a coup were possible, it would likely be a military coup of the upper echelons of the military command against Zelensky and potentially against his allies and the allies of the nationalists within the interior ministry of Ukraine.
Defense.
So yeah, if people aren't aware, like the militias, like the Azov Battalion, Right Sector, Kraken, all these neo-Nazi groups that you hear about in Ukraine aren't under the authority of the military. They're under the authority of the Interior Ministry. And like I hate to make the comparison because I don't think that ultimately Ukraine is like a Nazi state. They exist there, but I don't think that's obviously not what Zelensky is. there can be comparisons made to the structure that Germany had at the outset of the war, where Gestapo and SS and some of these groups, they were not part of the army. They were completely separate, and they competed with the army for equipment and manpower. So that's a similar situation you're seeing in Ukraine now, where these nationalist groups, these interior ministry militias, are actually competing, and it seemed to be winning out over the military for the newest and best Western equipment that's flowing in. So that's where the conflict would likely be if this did happen. Which I'm not saying it's likely or unlikely. I'm just saying it's possible. I'm not going to guess anywhere on the scale. I would say that the more losses that Ukraine suffers in the West based on bad political decisions, which there have been many, I would say that this holdout in Severodonetsk, Lysychansk area is a big one. It seems like the army wanted to withdraw from this area a long time ago, and the political leadership of Ukraine has forced them to stay because of political reasons. They need to among many things, to fight over every inch of territory. Well, that costs the army severely. So decisions like that make a coup more and more possible. It depends on at what point does the political leadership of Ukraine stop interfering in the military strategy for the war. Which in my opinion, they need to stop doing it immediately, because it seems like they're doing it a lot, and it really is costing them. But that's my view of things. Why it might see it differently.
No, I actually agree, like most of it. So I think that actually I was just thinking about this. I was saying, hey, I never thought about the potential for coup, and then the question came out. So the potential for coup or rebellion is, in my opinion, extremely high, because if, let's say, my projection that 80% of the regular force is gone, and then most of the troops, 80% of the troops that's out there now, or conscripts or mobilized troops, then the chances that they will not take orders anymore is actually very, very high. And someone on the higher ups may start to think that maybe it's up to them to be a hero and overthrow Zelensky. And that could happen, but it will not be a simple overthrow. It's going to become like Donbass #2. It's going to be like 2014 all over again. When they overthrew the previous president. Then after that, then the Donbass not happy. They started to rebel when they sent the military in to try to stop the civilians and whatever. Then they started to shoot each other, and then it become all chaotic, where the Ukrainian soldiers are shooting each other. I think that would be likely what we will see. And the people that will be holding this nationalist position, supporting Zelensky or whatever, or the present situation, will be like you say, the extremist group, the right sectors, the Azov, the SBU, because SBU themselves is tremendously huge. From my sensing, the population on the ground is sick of the war already, because the West don't really care about the East. The Western Ukraine don't care about the East, but their soldiers are being sent to the East to die. And this sentiment on the ground is going to push the chances of coup higher and higher. But the SBU is also at the same time, pissing off the population, because they are very intrusive. They have been, checking everyone's phone and making sure that no one is an informant. But they also captured and maybe perhaps even tortured a lot of people, innocent people. So because they are also paranoid about Russian spies and all this and collaborators. So all this secret policing and all this situation is happening on the front line. The mobilization, the displeasure is going to push someone to do something. But then there will be a pushback. From what I understood, the SBU and the people, all the organizations sitting within they're really committed to their cause. So we will see a civil war of sort. If a coup happens, it's not going to be a clean coup. You're going to become a civil war sort of situation. Then it will work into Russia's preference, though, I feel, because then they don't have to fight. Yeah.
I think to go with what you're saying, Wyatt, that map that Stefano brought up in the very beginning that was floating around on Russian propaganda that showed how the Russians saw like a kind of caste system in Ukraine with like Western, Eastern, and Central, or Western, Central, and Eastern, with Eastern being populated by Russians and not being treated as well. I think that in the event that what we're talking about happens, in what you're saying, if an internal Ukrainian civil conflict were to break out during the war, you would have probably something to look that would look like this, where the central parts of the country will likely be controlled by the military, where the western parts of the country will likely be very much in the I don't even know what to call, like, as Stefano pointed out, there's a lot of Polish mix in that part of the country, and this is where a lot of like like, I guess, Galatia, the region you would call it, is from, like where Ukraine wants to. Yeah, it's where they want to draw their currently where they want to draw their cultural history from, or at least the state, anyways, is from this region right here. So, the split would certainly be something to this extent.
It would be like a Libyan kind of situation where there's two different governments and they are fighting for control, and one of them will be backed by the Western powers, the other one will be backed by Russia, and then the one that will be backed by Russia probably is the one that is overthrowing Zelensky, and they may be working with the Russians to secure wherever land they can secure, and then it will then descend into a Libyan situation in the central and western side of Ukraine. But of course, this is very speculative.
Yeah. I would say if that happened, the Russian army would make vast gains very quickly in the eastern part of the country. They would have whoever's in front of them on the run.
Yeah.
Okay, I have the last question, and then maybe Eric can answer, and then we will move to a conclusion. It's about Armata Poseidon S-500 and whatever, about the new type of weapons that Russian could use, and if there is the chance of using in this war.
So for me, it's clearly we won't see any armatas in Ukraine. Just the fact that they have like 20 of them, and they are very costly. They even aren't entered in Russian service for the moment. We just saw the result with the T-90M that was destroyed just a few weeks ago, if I remember. So sending this kind of equipment in the Ukrainian theater would be just spending money for nothing.
I personally also don't think the Russians need to send in the Armata tank. The danger of having this top cutting edge technology getting captured is a huge risk, which is also why the West do not want to send the best weapons to Ukraine, because they still need to prepare for a possible war with Russia should that happen. So they are not going to give up many secrets. So most of this is not going to happen. I think S-500 is also not meant to fight such war. S-500 I think is meant more like anti-continental and anti-hypersonic, right? I think so, from my vague memory.
It's not anti-hypersonic, but it's built, I believe, initially to be like an extension and to work in unison with the S-400 system. So,
yes.
I mean, the Ukrainians, there's nothing that Ukraine can throw at Russia that Russia needs the S-500 to defend against, basically. Yeah. So you're not going to see it.
We hardly even heard about S-400s, to be honest. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think real quick about the Armada. I do think there is a possibility that you might see it closer to the end of the war, more as like a test trial phase. And you've seen kind of a similar thing with the Terminators around Popasna. Not very many of these tanks have been produced, but in order to understand whether or not they're going to actually be effective on a modern battlefield, like, they have to be tested somehow. and what better opportunity to test them than this current war right here on your doorstep. Now, I mean, an armada getting destroyed in Ukraine would certainly be bad, but I mean, the Russian government to me just doesn't seem like one to really be concerned with optics. I mean, they've obviously
Yeah.
never really been concerned with optics, not nearly as much as Western governments have. So I do think there's a chance, but I mean, it's a relatively new piece of equipment, and it's very much in its testing phase, and similar to like new fighter jets, you generally don't see new equipment like that enter production or even testing for the immediate time period after it's developed. It might be 8 or 10 years before it's even ready. I mean, supposedly these T-90s are that are being used in Ukraine. There's only a few that we've seen so far, and the Russians are claiming that they're testing them. And this is a tank that's been around. I mean, it was originally developed in the early 2000s or late 90s. I'm not sure exactly what the year, but it's been 20 years since the T-90 was thought up on paper, and they've only developed a couple hundred of them, and this is they've only used them in combat a handful of times. So
in fact, I
that's all I got
remember
to say
reading.
about the Armada.
I remember reading that someone mentioned maybe they are including some of these Armata parts in the T90M, so that they can actually test out the system. So instead of sending the actual Armata tank, you actually take components out to test out to see whether it works. I just read, but I vaguely remember I read something. Someone commented something like this before, so that could be very possible.
Okay, so if you want like to make the conclusion, maybe I'm very thankful to everybody and to the commenters. We are still, after 3 hours, still 80 people in live, so it's like miracle that nobody is suicidal. So I was very surprised that nobody make 2 questions that for me are very interesting. So I will give you, and then we will see maybe in the next stream. But I will put a super fast conclusion about the Finland and Sweden position in NATO. Nobody asked about it, but it's for me very interesting because it will increase a lot the border with NATO in the north. NATO Russia, it will be very difficult because Finland army, if you check about it, it's well prepared in Eastern Europe to make a conflict with Russia, and Finland are afraid historically of an invasion of Russia. So it will be interesting to watch what will happen in the next month. And the real news from yesterday and from the NATO meeting in Madrid was that Turkey left the veto with Sweden and Finland, but and in my strict opinion, the real winner of this war is Turkey. It's not Russia. It's not European Union. It's not US. Imagine like this. I was in Turkey in December. The Turkish lira was collapsing minus 70%. What weapon it's on the mouth of everybody? It's not Armata, it's not T90, it's not T whatever you want, it's Bayktar. So everybody wants Bayktar. So if you want to make propaganda of something to sell it, now everybody, Azerbaijani want a Bayktar, every army want Bayktar. There is like, I don't know, money funding on internet to buy Bayktar. So Turkey, they're very clever because they are doing the negotiation, not Europe, not US. So we are technically in diplomacy a little bit bad at the moment. Because I'm sorry, Eric, but we give a lot of power to Macron, and Macron actually is not in a good position to make negotiation. And in my point of view, for Germany, the war was a big chance to do what? Make a 100 billion euro in defense. And if it was not politically acceptable for Germany to reinvest in army, and now magically 100 billion euro in army budget. So it's bad and sad to say it, but everybody is taking advantage by the situation. We have only a problem that we have already more than 100,000 people died for national interest, of young people dying for nothing. And you will see about Turkey. Check if you want to come and go from Turkey, from Europe to Russia and vice versa. You have only 2+1 chance. By flight, you can only go through Serbia or through Istanbul. Check on Skyscanner how much cost one flight. Let's say Paris, Istanbul, Moscow. At least 1,500, 2,000 euro. 4 months ago was 300. So Turkish Airlines is making good money. Or you can go through Baltics by bus, but it's not amazing to take a night bus Tallinn and St. Petersburg with border control and whatever. So to make the conclusion, let's see what will happen. I thanks a lot for the viewer that stayed a lot also to the streaming. We will publish the streaming in HD as soon as possible with English subtitles. We will wait you probably in a next stream also with military summary and maybe new speaker probably before the end of the month. If you will have any question to put, you can send it by mail, cardinalemazarin@gmail.com. It's in the YouTube channel or on Facebook or whatever. If the speaker want to say something in conclusion, then we will close.
The only thing that all right, we're not muted. The only thing that I wanted to close with, real quick. I'm sorry. Let me see.
No, you're okay. You're okay.
I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Can you share the screen to me real quick?
Yes. Wait. Yes.
I just wanted to put my reading list up. I got it up here for you guys. If you really want to understand some of the problems that around globalization and stuff, this Absent Superpower is a great book. If you along with Ray Dalio's book Changing World Order, both very good books. The Storm Before the Calm is a great book for understanding the internal political and economic situation of America. It's probably one of the best books I've ever read. It's excellent. It gets pretty into detail in describing like the rise of Trump and a lot of those things as well. So it's very interesting. And then in terms of another Europe point, a video that just came out and I watched last night. This is a channel on YouTube called What If Alt His. Does amazing content. He's a younger guy. I believe he's a few years younger than me, but he's a very, very well-read historian. He understands like a lot of like these issues that go on like very deeply. This is just a great video, in depth, diving into some of the problems that Europe faces in the future. So I highly recommend this dude's content, and I highly recommend these books. And that's it from me. You guys can find me on YouTube. That's really the only place I am right now. New World Econ. I basically do the same thing Wyatt does. Give daily updates on the war and talk about geopolitics whenever I get the chance. So.
Me next.
Bye.
Can you help me share the screen?
Yes, sorry. Okay, let me give it to you. Okay.
So thank you everyone that came to watch this, especially the DPA Army. Thanks so much to support. Of course, this is the Newer Econs YouTube channel. Do subscribe. You see, I subscribe already. You should subscribe. So and also this channel that you're watching now, this YouTube channel, you must subscribe, because many more events is going to come through Cardinal Mazarin, Italian Geopolitics. I think Stefano planned a lot of stuff. I will be appearing in future editions, future stuff. Maybe not every one of them, but you'll see me around, I guess. And also, of course, for Eric, please do It's a bit hard to find, maybe because I keep spelling in this Eric word wrong. So yeah, it's EIRIK_N. Thanks. So yeah, do support. And you can also find information on defensepoliticsasia.com. You can go to the YouTube, which is preferable because I earn money there. This website don't really earn much money for me. So do support my channel. And last thing to add is that actually I'm sporting the Zelensky look today. This is my Singapore Army shirt. The color looks very similar, but the crest is different. It's not the Nazi one. I mean not the Ukrainian one. Yeah, so it's a Singapore Army crest. So yeah, that's all from me.
Okay, Eric, if you want to close.
Yeah, of course. Can I do a share?
Okay,
Can I share my
immediately.
screen? Yeah. So here I am. So on my, is it good?
Wait. Okay. Yes. Now,
Okay.
yes.
So on my Instagram, you can find daily updates. I will update a video about the front lines, about ground point of views, about the fightings, and giving infos about it. If you have any questions about military vehicles that you see in the combat, you can ask me. I answer to everyone. And of course, you can follow my Instagram and
Follow.
every other YouTube channel.
Okay. Perfect. Thanks, Eric. Thanks to everybody. And see you soon. And we will update you via the YouTube channel and with all the channel that we can about the next events. And please stay tuned because all these things it's finalized to create also a live session with not in YouTube, with a live group in October. I'm sure that I will be able to organize it with the presence with all the speakers that we are showing in these months. And be prepared because just when I will have all the information about it, I will share with you. So thank you for everybody that stayed over 3 hours, 20 minutes watching us. And for all the people that are watching this video after, that also last time were a lot of people, if you have any type of question for the next streaming or curiosity or whatever, please put it on the comments and we will answer in the next streams. So
yeah, and do check out the last stream. Yeah, because I put a lot of effort
Yes.
on that last stream. So yeah, please go and watch.
No,
the
last stream
presentation.
it was also interesting. The first stream was with a lot of analysis on field. You can check it because after 1 month you can see that a lot of prediction were right. So it's very interesting because the quality of all the streamers with a different point of view and different backgrounds, it's very oriented in the right side of what is happening. So thank you all and see you soon.
ありがとうございます。